There is a certain word in modern gaming that has been cropping up more and more as time has gone on, and that word is, of course, the infamous backlog. Having a backlog isn't inherently a bad thing. In fact, I myself also have a backlog. I feel like everybody, no matter who you are as a gamer, you have a backlog. There is games that you want to get to, there's games that you want to play. So when I make this video and when I'm talking in this video, don't think that I inherently have an issue with video game backlogs or that I have an issue with wanting to play new video games or wanting to collect video games, because it is quite the contrary. If you know me, I'm a huge video game collector and I have a massive, staggeringly long backlog. Longer than most people. Most gamers have a backlog of a couple hundred. I have my backlog on howlongtobeat.com and it's in the quad digits. With that being said, my issue with the backlog nowadays is, again, it's nothing to do with the games themselves, with the way that people go about it. It's with the way that gamers stress themselves out about their backlogs. Yes, there is gamers out there, and I didn't know how widespread of an issue this was until I started scrolling through Reddit. And then I started checking up on YouTube videos. And I realized this is a widespread issue. There is gamers out there that literally get stressed out about their backlogs. So, don't worry. This isn't going to be a video of me like ridiculing you or trying to make you feel bad about yourself. Rather, this is a video where I'm going to try to help you maybe feel better about your backlog. Because, I'm sitting here kind of making fun of that idea now. But I won't lie. There has been a couple of times where I have felt some feelings of stress because I've been sitting there like, am I going to be able to beat all these games before I die? So as I make this video, don't think of this video as coming from a place of bitterness or of a place of like lecture, but rather of a place of where I know where you're coming from, I know what you're dealing with. Because for the longest time, I was like, that's ridiculous. Like, who would be stressed out about having too many video games to play? Like, there's no such thing as too many video games. And then I got to the point of a couple of months ago where I was like, oh my gosh, there's a lot of games on my backlog. Am I going to be able to do this? And I started low-key stressing out about it for only about like a day though. And in the span of that day, I came to multiple realizations. The first one is, it's not a backlog. Do you want to know what a backlog is? A backlog is when you're still in high school and, these aren't actual textbooks, but we're just going to go ahead and pretend that they're textbooks for the context of this conversation. A backlog is when your history teacher comes up to you with a pile of textbooks and says, hey, I need you to read all of these before class tomorrow. These literally aren't textbooks though. This is like Lego Star Wars. Yeah, no, these aren't textbooks. But you get the point. Or when your boss at your office job comes in and he slams down the pile of papers and says, I need you to fill out all these papers, get them stamped, get them sent out to whoever by tomorrow. That is a backlog. A backlog of office papers, a backlog of textbooks. That is a backlog. It is something that you dread. It's something where you look at it and it's like, oh, I gotta deal with this backlog of papers. And now I'm going to go to the other side of my room real quick, and I am going to bring over a pile of games, and I'm going to explain why we should stop looking at these games as things that are on our backlog and, start looking at it from a different perspective. I have two exhibits that I would like to show you. So first we have Exhibit A. The Backlog Gamer. Now, I will confess, none of these games are on my backlog because I have absolutely no life, and this isn't my entire PS4 collection, by the way. This is maybe, like, half of it, maybe. Like, we're talking physical games. When it comes to digital games, that catalog goes even larger, but this is maybe, like, a little under half of my physical catalog. This is just what I could carry. So we have Exhibit A. The Backlog Gamer. They have all of these games that I literally can't even put on my desk at this point, and they look at this massive tower of games, and they go, where do I start? How am I ever going to beat these games? And they get literally stressed out about this. And again, this isn't coming from a place of lecture or a place of ridicule, because I have been in your shoes before. Well, I was in that place for about 24 hours before realizing how ridiculous it was. So the Backlog Gamer will start with, we're not going to start with Madden 16. No, we're just going to toss that one off to the side. No, thank you. We'll start with a game like Grand Theft Auto 5. They never played Grand Theft Auto 5 before. They get really excited before being struck with that oh-so-infamous analysis paralysis. They pick up Grand Theft Auto 5, really excited to dive into it, they really want to try it, before they look at the rest of the games in their backlog, and they go, is this really the game that I want to play today? Is this the best thing that I could be doing with my time? What if instead I went ahead and knocked Jump Force off the backlog, or Final Fantasy 15, or Diablo 3, or maybe Days Gone, or maybe the entire Dark Souls trilogy? Oh, look at that! It's a long RPG, Cyberpunk. Maybe I could play that instead, or maybe I could go through and knock out all of the Call of Duty games in the next week, or maybe I could die 1,000 times in Bloodborne, or maybe I could just go through Battlefield Hardline. I've heard good things about that one. Or maybe I could sell my soul to Ubisoft and give up my life for the next month and play Assassin's Creed Valhalla. No, I have an even better idea. I am going to rush through all of these games. According to howlongtobeat.com, if I skip out on all of the extra content inside of the Souls games, I could save myself 20 hours by only defeating the main bosses in Elden Ring and skipping out on all the extra side content in the world. So yeah, that's how we're going to go about this. You know, for GTA 5, it's saying main plus extra is going to take me about like 35 hours. How about we just rush through the main story, get it done in 15 hours, we'll be all set. Fast forward about 2 months later, and here is the Exhibit A gamer. He is absolutely drained. He has beaten all of these games at this point, and you want to know something? He can barely retain anything from any of these games. He's looking at Assassin's Creed Valhalla like, I rushed through this one. I can barely tell you anything because I skipped through most of the dialogue. GTA 5, wait, the Strangers and Freaks missions, what are those? I only did the main story, my guy. Days Gone, I can't remember much about that. I just wanted to get through it. It was at a point of where I was stressing myself out, so I just kind of rushed through some of the stuff. I cranked the difficulty down just to get through it. Battlefield Hardline, honestly, I just played this one so I could check it off the list. Let me just clarify, this isn't like me, by the way. Like, this isn't how I actually play these games. Like Assassin's Creed, GTA, Days Gone, Battlefield, I actually took my time with all these games and played them thoroughly and like fell in love with all these games. This is just an example of the Exhibit A gamer, aka the modern gamer with a backlog. And I'm gonna tell you, you know, most times I would say there's no wrong way to experience games, but in this instance, yes, if you go through your backlog like this, which sadly, this is how many people tackle their backlog, you are playing the games wrong. You are robbing yourself of many experiences, and now it's time to move on to Exhibit B. Exhibit B is more close to how I look at games nowadays, not just nowadays, but how I've always looked at games. And while granted my approach to playing these games and the way that I'm about to describe it is definitely different from how I do things nowadays, just because, again, I do still have a backlog technically, or a collection of games that I want to play through, but I also don't sit there stressing myself out about it. So we have the first game here, and this is for the Exhibit B gamer, and I don't really know how to describe this gamer, so we'll just go ahead and kind of lay the foundation for you guys. So this is a true story. Exhibit B is me. This is how I tackle my games. This is how I look at games. This is how I play through games. So the Exhibit B gamer, let's go all the way back to 2008. This Exhibit B gamer, he's a huge fan of Legos. He's been seeing all these Lego games, and he's been really excited about them. He's been getting like the Mr. Freeze Lego toys and his Happy Meals and such. And one fabled day, his parents come home from the game store in 2008. You know, I'm sitting there playing on, I believe I was playing something on the PS1. I was probably playing like Rampage. And all of a sudden, I am gifted this. Lego Batman, the video game. I played this game endlessly. As soon as I got it, I immediately fell in love. I took it, and this is my original copy from 2008, by the way. I opened it up for the first time. And I mean, even still opening it up, I was just like, I remember, because this was back in the day, right? Like, we didn't have as much money. When it came to finding out about games, it was through commercials or magazines or whatever. And I remember just opening up this game, looking on the inside. I remember taking out the manual, flipping through it. Like, before I even put the game in, I was just in awe at what I was holding. And I was, you know, flipping through the manual back when manuals were still a thing. And I was just, my brain couldn't even contain the excitement for the adventure I was about to go on. I was reading through the back. I took out the disc. Let's go ahead and examine the disc. Oh my gosh, it's still in pristine condition today. I put this game in, and I did not put it down until I beat it. I played through the main story mode, and then I went through and played in the Arkham Asylum mode. And I remember I went through and I even 100%ed this game. Now, I'm not saying you need to 100% every game. Of course not. But what I am saying is, the thing that, the problem with the backlogs is it deters from your enjoyment of the games, whether you realize it or not. Whether you actively are trying to rush through the games, or whether you're just subconsciously trying to get through it at a bit of a heightened pace just so you can get to the next game on the backlog, you're taking away from your own enjoyment of the game and your own experience and your ability to truly fall in love and get immersed in the game if you're trying to just go game to game to game to game. And again, I'm somewhat guilty of this, or at the very least, I was in the past. Like, there was a couple of times where I was just trying to get to the next game, But nowadays, I've realized, screw howlongtobeat.com. Screw all this stuff. Who cares how long a game is? If you want to play a game, play a game. The most important thing I realized is, one day we're all going to die. And whether we beat these games or not, it's not going to matter. Do you want to know why? Because we're going to be dead. like, how can you care if you're dead? Think about this realistically. When you're dead, what is there? You're underground, you're dead, you're buried, you're seeing nothing but black, or maybe you're in heaven or, you know, wherever else, depending on your religion. But your time on this earth, your physical time on this earth is gone, is over. So who's going to care? Are you going to care? No, because you're dead, you're underground. Who cares? You're dead. Is anybody else going to care? No, they don't care about your specific backlog. They got their own backlog to take care of. So why rush through all these games and stress yourself out and make it like your secondary job on top of your already stressful 9-to-5 or full-time job or whatever job you do, when gaming is supposed to be an escape? It's supposed to be a hobby. I mean, for me, my job is to play video games and, make videos on them and talk about them. And whenever I'm not making videos, I'm playing games, you know what I mean? Like, I spend most of my time playing games or making content based around playing games. So for me, as corny or cliche as it sounds, for me, and most of you can probably relate to this, gaming isn't just a hobby. It's like more or less a lifestyle. So, whether it is just a hobby, supposed to be a fun getaway for you, or whether it's your lifestyle, no matter what your circumstances are, why stress yourself out about it? Why look at this pile of games and get stressed out? Like, back in 2008, if I got this one game, I would have been happy. If I would have been gifted a stack of games like this, do you know how ecstatic I would have been? I would have been set. I would have looked at this and thought, this is it. This is all that I need until the day I die. Now, realistically, I ended up beating all these games in less than a 2-month span. But that being said, that's how things were back then. You took your time, you grabbed a game, you were like, I am ready to get immersed in Lego Incredibles. I had like a 1-month span where I sat there rushing through a bunch of games, just trying to get them done. I was like, I'm gonna get this backlog done. And it honestly wasn't enjoyable. And nowadays, I'm back to my 2008 roots. I grab a game, I look at it. I don't know why Madden is on. We're gonna put Madden off to the side indefinitely. Let's look at a game like Cyberpunk, one of my top 5 favorite games of all time. Do you want to know why? I didn't rush through the main story. I wasn't just trying to check it off the list. I took this game, I looked at it, I looked at it head on, and I was like, I'm going to play this game, and I'm going to fall in love with it. And as I just stated, it's in my top 5 favorite games of all time. And so is Lego Batman, by the way. Lego Batman's in my top 5 of all time, and so is Cyberpunk. And keep in mind, in 2022, I beat 160 games, and so far in 2023, I've beaten 90 games. And I could have made so much more progress. I bet by now with, how much I play games, I probably could have beaten like over 100, over 120 at this point if I would have rushed through games. But instead, I'm only at 90 for the year, which again, for most people is probably still a good bit. But, for me personally, I'm like 30 to 40 games behind where I could have been just because I've decided that I'm going to slow down. I'm going to take my time. And like Cyberpunk, for example, I beat the main story in only about like maybe 3 days because the main story, or no, it was actually only like 2 days because from what I remember, the main story only took me maybe like 12 to 13 hours to beat. So yeah, I knocked that out in about 2 days. And then after that, I spent like the next week just going through and 100% in the game because I absolutely fell in love with the world and I experienced all these different side quests. I went for all the different endings and I got truly attached to this world. I fell in love with like Judy and all the other characters of the game, like Jackie. And I just never wanted it to end. And I remember on the final day when I completed the last ending and then I went back and finished the final side quest chain, I sat there with one of the people that's like friends with the main character V in the game. And I remember it was at the end of a mission and you're sitting there on top of like this tower thing and you're just staring off to the sunset, you're sipping your beers or whatever. And I remember just sitting there like, man, this is the last time that I'm going to play Cyberpunk. And I had this whole emotional moment where I was reflecting my entire journey between the main story, between the side quests, between all the different endings I got, all the different crazy times with Johnny Silverhand. And I don't know, there was that moment where I was just sitting there like, this is one of the best games that I've ever played. And if I would have just stuck to the main quest, knocked it out in 2 days and moved on to the next team, this would probably be nothing more than like another one on the list. But because I sat there and took the time to have that kind of experience with this game, it is now one of my top 5 of all time. And since then, that's how I've been treating every single game that I play. I take the time to open it up. I'm not going to open this one up because a bunch of stuff falls out, but I take the time to open it up, look at the disc, look at the back, or even if it's a digital game, I'll go to the store page, I'll scroll through the screenshots, I'll read the description, do whatever I can just to get myself excited and ready for the game. And I'm not saying you need to 100% every game, not even close. You don't need to do all the side quests even if you just stick to the main quest and that's all you want to do. All I'm trying to say is stop looking at it as like this long, stressful checklist where it's like, oh, I gotta beat this, I don't know what I'm gonna do. Stop stressing yourself out. Just go into each game excited for it and just take your time. Whether it takes you 1 day, 5 days, 10 days, who cares? Just make sure that you make the most of your experience. If you stop after the main story, that's okay. If you stop after all the side quests, that's okay. If you don't even beat the game, period, that's okay. As long as you had your fun, that's what counts. And if you decide to 100% it, awesome. Games are games. They're meant to be savored. They're meant to be enjoyed. Whether it's a short game like a Memoir Blue that you beat in an hour, or whether it's a game like Assassin's Creed Valhalla that takes you upwards of 100. As long as you enjoy your time and your experience, whether you beat it or not, whether you 100% it or not, whether you stick to the main quest or not, just make sure you're actually soaking in that experience and you're not just rushing through it to check another one off the list. Because at the end of the day, well then, if that's what you're doing, what's the point? Rather than looking at a stack of games or looking at your stack of, digital games and, just going through to check another one off the list as fast as you can to get through the whole pile and then feeling rather empty at the end, why not instead just go a game at a time and get back to that feeling back in, the early 2000s or whenever, however old you are, whatever time it is, where, you're a kid and you get that one game and you're so excited to play that one game. When we were young, we got that one game, we looked at it, we were excited, we were ready to play for the next couple of months. Whether you pick up a game and you plan to play for the next couple of months or whether it's just the next couple of days until you beat it, no matter what it is, that's the feeling we need to get back to. When you pick up a game and you just go, like, you open it up and you just feel that inner childish joy of like, yes, I'm gonna play this, I'm gonna enjoy this. That's the problem with modern video game backlogs. It's not necessarily the backlogs themselves, and I know this video is probably much longer than it needed to be, but sometimes I'm bad at constructing my thoughts, and I was just making sure I got out everything that I needed to say on the subject. No matter what it is, no matter how you go about playing your games, just make sure that you're still falling in love with them, that you're still enjoying them, that you're still taking that time, whether it's physical or digital, to just take it all in. I don't know. This is just something that I'm really passionate about. It's something that I've been seeing online for a long time, and don't look at it as a backlog of games. I mean, just remember, when we were children, this is all we could have ever asked for. This is all we would have ever wanted. We're literally living our childhood dreams, and we're allowing our childhood dreams to stress us out. Why? Stop getting stressed out about your backlog. Just play the games, fall in love, and enjoy them. If you beat them all, cool. If not, that's cool too. One day we're all going to be dead, and at that point it won't matter. So just make the most of the time you have, and if you get through them all, cool. If you don't, cool. As long as you make the most of your time, that's what matters. As long as you're having fun, that's what matters. At the end of the day, would you rather die knowing that you rushed through all of these games and you barely had any connection to them and you barely felt satisfied afterwards? Or would you rather die knowing that you fell in love with so many great experiences and took your time to truly soak them in and have all this wellspring of knowledge and love and true passion for these games? I don't know about you, but I'd definitely rather go with option B, because since I've chosen to play my games this way, well, I have so many experiences and so much love for all of these games here and so many more that I didn't even pull out of my collection, because I literally have like hundreds of physical games at this point. I won't drag this video out anymore. I know it's been going for a while and I know I should probably wrap things up, but this, again, is just something I'm passionate about, just something I wanted to get out there, and hopefully it helps somebody out there. Just remember, slow down and take it all in. Just allow yourself to fall in love, allow yourself to get consumed with that childish joy, and just let's all make an effort to just open up our games and get back to that feeling. Remember, it's not a backlog. It's your childhood dream come true. You know what I miss? I miss dedicated handhelds. Now, I know nowadays we got things here like the Nintendo Switch, and as cool as something like this is, at the same time, it is still also a console. And granted, that's the whole point of the Switch, right? It's a 2-in-1. It can be a handheld, it can be a console, and nowadays we also have other handhelds coming out, like PC handhelds like the Steam Deck OLED, the ROG Ally, and the MSI Claw, and all these other things that are coming out. When I say I miss handheld gaming, I mean, I miss handheld gaming. These dedicated handhelds that have been coming out, well, that were coming out between the late 80s up until like the early 2010s. And me being the boomer that I am, I decided today, why don't we go ahead and take a look back at some of these handhelds and why I love them so much and just some of the quirks with some of them. This isn't going to be like an overly in-depth video, as we do have quite a couple handhelds to go through, so we're going to just kind of like hit on the bullet points, kind of talk briefly about why I love each one, and maybe one day we'll make in-depth videos dedicated to each one. But first things first, let's start out with where it all began with the Game Boy, which came out April 21st, 1989 in Japan, and then it came out later here in North America. I personally do not own a Game Boy anymore, as the one that I did own kind of took a crap, so I do have to buy another one at some point. I'm the type of guy where, like, even though, yes, I do have this DS Lite, and I do, in fact, have an R4 card, I'm not gonna lie, and inside of this R4 card, I actually have emulators for both Game Boy. Well, it's not actually an emulator for Game Boy Advance, because, DS Lite just runs, Game Boy Advance natively, so I have my Game Boy Advance games on here, which can run natively on the DS Lite, as well as a Game Boy and Game Boy Color emulator. So, realistically, I don't actually need to buy another Game Boy, but it's one of those things, I'm one of those those people. I'm just like, I like having the native hardware. But anyway, back to the Game Boy. So the Game Boy was revolutionary at the time. This was the first time where you were truly able to have almost, I will say, in some aspects, console level experiences on the go. Like, when you look at the Game Boy, there was like genuine attempts to bring some of those NES type games to the Game Boy, and for the most part, I would say that they were successful in that. I can't really think, I mean, sure, there was a few issues. Obviously, there wasn't any backlight on the Game Boy, you know, when you were like sitting in the car. Man, I can even remember back in the day, because, you know, obviously I wasn't alive for the Game Boy, but I did have one later on, and I can remember having like those things where you like shine a light, or like the things you can attach to the Game Boy to have like a light over it, sitting in the car, just like, just anytime that you pass a street light, oh yes, I can play again. And then screen crunch was another thing. Like, if you try to go back and play the original Mario Bros on Game Boy, it's definitely a playable experience, but it's one of those things where it's like, oh, certain jumps, when you're trying to make those certain jumps, where it's like, oh man, I can't even see where I'm going. It can get a little tricky. And then other games like Donkey Kong Land, just due to the nature of the screen lacking color, unfortunately, that screen can kind of look like that game can look like a hodgepodge of pixels at times. But this is where we saw the beginning of many, like, just, long-time staples of not only handheld gaming, but now, like, you know, like, just gaming period, like Pokemon, for example. That started out on the Game Boy with Pokemon Red and Blue over here in America. Obviously, in Japan, they had other versions, and then later on, Pokemon Yellow, which Pokemon Yellow was more of, like, a Game Boy Color thing, which we'll talk about that here in a minute. But obviously, like, Pokemon it's still around to this day, with entries like Scarlet and Violet literally just releasing, like, almost 2 years ago at this point. Which I feel like that would be a good segue into the Game Boy Color, which released October 21st in 1998. And the Game Boy Color, you know, it was always like marketed as the same, where it's like a Game Boy but with color, but it's not a new Game Boy. But let's be honest, dude, there were so many new and exclusive games or different versions of games that released for the Game Boy Color that when I look at the Game Boy Color, I look at that as like the Game Boy 2 per se, even though it was basically fully backwards compatible, or, you know, like, whatever. Like, there was a lot of games that could go back and forth between the Game Boy and Game Boy Color. Like, some Game Boy Color games worked on the Game Boy, and basically, you know, like, every Game Boy game worked on the Game Boy Color. And again, Nintendo was always trying to be like, no, this isn't a new Game Boy, it's just a different version of it with color and all that. But I don't know, man. When I'm looking at it, like, that thing to me is the new... It was like a new Game Boy with how many exclusive games came out on it. But playing games like Pokemon Yellow on it, for example, back in the day, where, you know, you were, like, playing Pokemon but in color for the first time on the go, it was just absolutely amazing. One weird thing was, though, there was still no backlight, so, you know, that's a thing. But otherwise, the Game Boy Color, it was literally just the Game Boy, but, you know, with color. So it was an amazing system, and again, they were just trying to bring a lot of those games that you would see on something like the NES over to the handheld experience. We weren't seeing things on the level like SNES yet, but still it was like NES to later NES titles that we sometimes would see ported over to there, or just, you know, games of that quality, with some exceptions with things like Donkey Kong Land, like we were talking about earlier, which that, you know, could arguably be like an SNES type experience on the go. There was also other handhelds that came out around this time that are worth mentioning, stuff like, you know, the Game Gear, or, you know, like the Neo Geo Pocket, for example, but we're just kind of sticking to like the mainline ones that were like, you know, like super big and super popular. But, you know, if I ever do end up making like a full in-depth retrospective on, you know, these kinds of handheld systems, or if you guys want to see something like that, actually it'd be cool to dive into stuff like the Neo Geo Pocket or the Game Gear or whatever, because I actually have a lot of nostalgia and love for those. Then June 11th, 2001, we received the GBA, which the GBA, let me just say, this console or this handheld, whatever you want to call it, is absolutely, it's one of my favorites of all time, definitely up there. This is where we saw SNES level games on the go, and it was really interesting. This was like probably one of the only Nintendo consoles, if not the only one I can think of, where it didn't get a traditional Mario game, like a traditional 2D Mario game. It got the 4 Mario Advance games, which were obviously Super Mario Bros. 2, 3, Super Mario World, and Yoshi's Island, but outside of that, like, sure, we had things like Mario and Luigi and Mario Kart Super Circuit and all that, but like, there wasn't a single traditional, like, just fresh, brand new 2D Mario experience on there. But I mean, hey, regardless, I don't mind, because it's pretty cool. You know, obviously, again, I don't have a Game Boy Advance, another thing that I got to repurchase. And when I do, I'm going to get the SP for one specific reason. Or, I mean, I also want to get a micro at some point. I want to get an SP and a micro. The original Game Boy Advance, for some reason, still no backlight, but the SP, which is essentially like the DS minus the second screen, you literally flip it open, got the clamshell design, screen on top, BA, D-pad, all that. That one actually has a backlight as well as the Game Boy Micro. The Micro, it's not the most comfortable thing to play. I remember having mine back in the day, and it was one of those things where it was like a cool little gimmick, I guess you could call it. But I don't know, man. That thing was so tiny. But again, it's so cool having something like that. And the games on that look absolutely beautiful because obviously the screen's so small. And there's just so many amazing. Like I can't even begin to list off just how many amazing games were on there. Yeah, like some of the 2D Crash games, for example, or Star Wars Episode 3, which is one of my favorite beat 'em ups of all time. It's funny because that was also the era where you could have two games with the same name, but they'd be completely different. Like Star Wars, for example, like Star Wars Episode 3 on the GBA was a 2D side-scrolling beat 'em up, but then on like PS2 and Xbox and all that, it was like, you know, a 3D action adventure hack and slash type game. All in all, I absolutely love the GBA. So many amazing games that we saw there. And then November 21st, 2004, we received the DS. But in my case, I have the DS Lite, which released June 11th, 2006. And yeah, man, the DS. This is one of those systems where it's like, do I even need to talk about it? We all know why the DS is amazing. One of the first games that came out for it, a launch game for this title, was Super Mario 64 DS, a literal remake of an N64 game. And let me just say, back in the day, having a literal console game on the go, a remake at that, with more content of a console game on the go, and, you know, Super Mario 64 was one of my favorite games growing up. So much nostalgia for that game. So being able to take it on the go with all these new characters and, you know, new stars to go for and all that, being able to play as Wario, Luigi, and Yoshi, especially after the whole L was real stuff back in the day, which that was one of those things where it's like you hear about it now, it's like one of those legendary things in gaming, but you truly had to be there for the whole L was real hype or that whole debacle. But the DS, the library of Mario Kart DS, one of the best Mario Karts of all time, in my opinion. One of my favorites for sure, right up there. I'd say Mario Kart 8 is probably my overall favorite, but Mario Kart DS is definitely right behind it. New Super Mario Bros. DS, which, say what you will about the New Super Mario Bros. Series. Personally, I've always loved every game in that series. It could still be going to this day, and I'd still love it. I love those games, probably because, you know, I grew up with New Super Mario Bros. DS. All the Lego games that were on here, because it was cool, because they weren't necessarily the console versions of the Lego games, but they were like just completely new versions of the Lego games. So even if you played the Lego games before, like Lego Batman, if you played it on the DS, it's a completely different game. And then you had a lot of like GBA type games, or not necessarily ports, but like different versions of them, like Star Wars Episode 3. It was basically the same game on here as it was on the GBA, except now you had access to like a second screen, some extra things there. And then you had like Call of Duty games on the DS, which is, I actually had all of them back in the day. They released COD 4, World of War, Modern Warfare 2, Black Ops 1, Modern Warfare 3, and that was it. We never got to see Black Ops 2, but I mean, at that point, the 3DS was out, so I mean, hey man, we could have got like Black Ops 2 on the 3DS, why not? And it was pretty cool because even though World of War didn't have it, Black Ops had it, the Zombies mode on DS, which was awesome, and they had like online multiplayer and everything. It has been since shut down, but you know, due to like the modding community, they have brought some of those servers back, and that goes for like a lot of DS games, so you know, there is hope. There is ways to play those DS games still online to this day, which is awesome. And yeah, there's so many amazing games that I loved on here. Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions, which was nothing like the console version. It was a 2D Metroidvania, but I absolutely love that game. One of my favorite games of all time here on the DS. Also, I love the console version too. But the DS version is just, it's so unique. I mean, if I had to choose between the console version and the DS version, I don't think I could. Like, they're both just completely different games that are amazing in their own rights. And then Spider-Man Web of Shadows, which was essentially the same thing. It was nothing like the 3D counterpart on the consoles, like, you know, on Xbox 360 and PS3. It was like a 2D Metroidvania on here, which is funny because that game had three versions. You had the Xbox 360, PS3, Wii, and PC version. Then you had the DS version. Then you had the PSP and PS2 version, which was also a 2D game, but it wasn't a Metroidvania game like the DS version. It was more of like a 2D beat 'em up on the PS2 and PSP. And you had other games that were so creative, like Scribblenauts, for example. Just so many amazing games. Oh, Grand Theft Auto Chinatown Wars. Being able to sell drugs and just commit so many crimes on the go on a Nintendo handheld, that was something else. I mean, sure, I know we had GTAs on the Game Boys and stuff like that, but I don't know, man. Chinatown Wars, it was just like a whole other level. All in all, words cannot describe my love and appreciation for the DS, and this is the same case that I've had since like 2010, 2011, something like that. I mean, it still holds up to this day. Sure, you can see some of the rubber is kind of come off over time, or whatever you want to call it. But I absolutely love the DS. It will always be one of my favorite handhelds, and I still play it like all the time to this day. And then there was the re-releases of the DS, which we're not really going to talk about, but they did, you know, the DSi, the DSi XL, which unfortunately they removed the GBA slot, which means you couldn't really play like, you know, like Rock Band or whatever on the DS anymore. Like, come on, dude, you needed that GBA slot. So you know, you plug in the thing, you sit there playing the guitar, but DSi took it away. So not only could you not play GBA games, but you can't play Rock Band anymore. Like, why? And then March 24th, 2005, we received the PSP. And this, oh my gosh, dude, the nostalgia for this one, it's just, ooh, gotta contain myself. And I love this system so much. This is the PSP 3000. I did have a 1000 back in the day, but I just, bought a 3000 recently. And the 3000 is definitely my favorite model. I know there's a lot of controversy as to what model is the best. If you go with the 1000, you only have 32 megabytes of RAM, which can be a little bit iffy if you're trying to do some modding. The 2000 and the 3000 are essentially the same except for the screens. I went for the 3000 because the 2000, well, I mean, you can't go wrong with any PSP model, really. I know there's a lot of people that also love like the PSP Go. I'm sure there's probably somebody out there that likes the PSP Shriek. The PSP 3000, sure, there's scan lines, people say, but they're really never noticeable unless you're looking for them. And even then, they're really not ever that visible. Like, there's only like, I'm going to say this much, right? I put literal hundreds of hours of gameplay into my PSP, and there was only been 10 times I could probably count, that I've actually noticed the scan lines in-game, and even then, it was on, like, a menu. Like, with the PSP 3000, there's a chance that you might see some interlacing scan lines at some point, or you can go with the 2000 where everything's like a ghosting, blurry, motion blurring mess where like when there's too much motion on screen, you start seeing some like blurring around the assets and stuff like that, and I'd rather go for the clearer picture that just, overall looks nicer. And one thing with the 3000 is there is two color space settings. One is normal, one is wide. Wide makes it so that, there's like the colors are more vivid and it's overall like the best looking screen of the PSPs. Or you can go with normal mode. Me personally, I don't like all the oversaturated colors, so I still go with the normal mode. It's the same reason that even though I have a Switch OLED, I never go with the vivid colors and the settings. I just stick to standard. Maybe it's because when I was growing up, I grew up on CRTs for a while, and then even after that, once flat screens started becoming more popular, I had an LCD and never upgraded to OLED. Like to this day, I'm still rocking the same 1080p 32-inch LCD screen that I've had for over like a decade and a half at this point. I don't know, man. There's something about like all the new OLEDs and stuff, I feel like they're almost like too overly saturated, and it just kind of makes me feel nauseated after a while with all the bright colors. Maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm weird, but that's just how I am. Now, the PSP, this was essentially like, PS2 on the go. Sure, like even when they brought PS2 games to this, there was sometimes concessions that needed to be made or performance differences that needed to be made. Like, for example, the Godfather game, on the PS2, Xbox and all that, it's an open world GTA type game. But on here, they kind of stripped out the open world, and it's more of like, they have like this whole different system to give you the same feeling or allow you to interact with the same gameplay styles that you would in that game, like the extortions and stuff, where you kind of like pick and choose where you're going to go on the map rather than driving there through a seamless open world, and it just kind of strings you along with the story missions depending on which mode you choose. So there's that. But there was also times where we had like full-on PS2 level games just on this thing that were exclusive to this for a while, like GTA Liberty City Stories and Vice City Stories, which were literally just full-on GTA 3 and Vice City San Andreas level games, but on the go on PSP with zero concessions made, that were then later ported to PS2. But if I'm going to be honest, I'm that type of guy where it's like, if a game was released for a system first, I'd rather play the original version or the original thing it was intended to be released on. Then we also saw other like console level games like Lego Batman, Lego Indiana Jones, Lego Star Wars 2, and those were all the exact same console games but on the go. But then later in the PSP's life, they started to stop doing that, and then they gave us the mobile versions instead, because again, as we were talking about with the DS earlier, there's two kinds of Lego games. There's the console versions, then there's the handheld dedicated versions. And then, so after like Lego Batman and such, then we started to get the handheld versions on here. So Lego Indiana Jones 2 wasn't the console version, it was sort of like the handheld DS version, so there's that. And the only gripe that it's not even a gripe for me personally, but it's like the only gripe that I ever hear about the PSP in general, and it's the fact that it only has one stick, right? Because like, you think of a console game, oh yeah, two analog sticks, but for this, you only have the one nub. So when it came to camera controls, usually was somewhere like you hold the left bumper, then you move the stick around if you want camera controls, or, first-person shooters, you had to use the buttons over here to look around, and then use these to like switch weapons or reload. And for me, I never had a problem with that. I actually, I always thought it worked. It's a very comfortable system. I mean, some people, I understand their frustrations or nitpicks or whatever, but for me, I never really had a problem with it. Like, sure, in some circumstances, in some games, there has been a couple times where it's like, alright, maybe a second stick would have been nicer, but for the most part, I feel like the developers always did a really good job of like giving you an intuitive way to control the camera or make up for the lack of a second stick. And that's one of the things that I love about hardware like this. It's like seeing how creative developers can get around hardware limitations or restrictions or anything like that. Overall, I love the PSP, so much nostalgia for this system. And if you haven't gotten one to this day, sure, you can play PSP games on PS Vita with Adrenaline and all that, whatever. But I don't know. For me personally, I'm the type of guy where, again, I always go for our original hardware. So I can highly recommend picking up an original PSP, any model to this day. But I'm biased, so I will say, if you can, get the 3000. And then February 26, 2011, we received the 3DS, which I do not have my original 3DS anymore, unfortunately. But what I do have is the 2DS. Now, let's go ahead and talk about this. There was many iterations of the 3DS. We had the 3DS, the 3DS XL, we had the 2DS, and the new 2DS XL, and then we also had the new 3DS and the new 3DS XL. So that's like 6 different variations right there, if my Asian math is telling me correctly. But I mean, when it comes to the 3DS, there's a lot that I could say about it, but there's also like not a lot I could say about it. So, well, I mean, and that I'm not trying to be reductive or say it's bad. It's nowhere near being a bad system. It's an amazing system. But my thing is, right, it's literally just like the DS, but more of it. So everything that I complimented or said about the DS, it transfers over to here, but more. And you may be wondering, but more, is it really that much better than the DS? And yes, because it's literally backwards compatible with it. So again, this is one of those things where when I play DS games, I play them on original hardware. But if you have to choose between a DS or a 3DS, like if your budget's limited, go for a 3DS. I mean, it's literally fully backwards compatible. There's like no compatibility issues. You plug in the game and it's that. If you had an R4 card for the DS back in the day, it'll still work in this. And obviously you can play all your 3DS games. And if you get a little funky with Homebrew, you can get some emulators on here and run like Game Boy Color and all this other stuff on here. But the 3DS, I don't know where I would compare it to console level stuff. We saw like GameCube level games. We also saw a lot of N64 remake type of games. Like we had like Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask 3D, but then we also had like GameCube level game like Luigi's Mansion, for example, which literally just ported to the 3DS. And then we also got like full-blown sequels to games on here, which wasn't new for Nintendo consoles. Like we got a full-blown, entry in the Mario Kart series, for example, on DS, but on like 3DS, again, we were getting stuff like Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon and Mario Kart 7, where it was literally like, it wasn't just some handheld spin-off of the game. No, and that's one thing that I will say about the PSP. Rarely did we see like actually full numbered entries in like Sony's library, which also transfers over to the PS Vita, which we'll talk about next. It was always spin-off stuff like God of War, Chains of Olympus, and Ghost of Sparta. Like that was more just like not necessarily spin-off, but like side story stuff that wasn't necessarily mandatory to understand the full story of like Kratos and God of War and stuff like that. And then like Daxter, which was like, again, it was explaining a plot hole, I guess you could say, in one of the Jak and Daxter games. But again, it wasn't necessary to understanding Jak 2. But there were so many amazing games for the 3DS. Like it was one of those things, right, where it was like everything that you could compliment about the DS, it could be said about the 3DS. Like the games were all amazing. The support for the system was amazing. For example, like New Super Mario Bros. It was on here. We got New Super Mario Bros. 2, and again, it was backwards compatible, so you could still play the original. We got games like Super Mario 3D Land, which is one of my favorite Mario games of all time. Mario Kart 7 was a lot of fun. I'm just trying to think of like all the amazing games off the top of my head. We had like some really groundbreaking games for the 3DS, like Resident Evil Revelations. Like seeing that game run on the 3DS was absolutely insane. Kid Icarus Uprising, which say what you will about the controls, I honestly never had a problem with it. I always loved that game. We saw Wii games on the 3DS, like Hello, like Kirby's Epic Extra Yarn or Extra Epic Yarn. Donkey Kong Country Returns, again, literally a Wii game, but on 3DS, and some people would say that this is the definitive version due to the lack of waggle. I always have had like, just a soft spot for the launch titles as well, like Pilot Wings Resort, for example, and like Street Fighter 4 and like Steel Diver. I always thought that those games were like just a lot of fun to play through. And again, it was one of those things where it's like, they were launch titles, so for a while that was like your only option or some of your only options. And other games like Asphalt 3D, I love games like that. And man, I don't know. And this system again was supported for so long, and it went beyond just like first-party Nintendo support. And again, let me just say, first-party Nintendo support was insane. There were so many amazing games on this console. I could literally sit here all day and list them off, like Legend of Zelda: Link Between Worlds, Kirby Planet Robo-Buy. Like it goes on and on. There were so many amazing games on here. But then we had like a lot of indie support down the line. Like even after the system was done, we saw stuff like Retro City Rampage coming to the system. All in all, the 3DS family of systems is one of those things, again, like the PSP, where it's like it doesn't matter if you get a 3DS XL, new 3DS, new 3DS XL, 2DS, new 2DS XL. The only wrong way to get a 3DS or one of the 3DS family of systems is to simply not get one at all. Like if you don't have a 3DS in your collection or a 2DS, Again, if you had to choose between a DS or a 2DS, or I would definitely say go with like a a 3DS type system, just because again it is fully backwards compatible, and there's so many amazing games for the system, and there's so many things that I love about it. And if you're into homebrewing and modding, like that community's huge. One thing, for example, is like YouTube obviously doesn't work on the 2DS anymore, or the 3DS or whatever. And you can get this app called ThirdTube, which is essentially like YouTube on there. So, I sometimes I sit on here and watch YouTube, like some nostalgic videos like ASDF movie or whatever. I have a lot of nostalgia and a lot of love for the system, if that wasn't obvious enough. And yeah, I hold my 2DS dearly. Just such an amazing system, and just yeah. Not to mention other things like Street Pass and being able to like record audio, which I know you can do that on the DSi technically, but I don't know, man, being able to like mess with pictures and all the audio mess around stuff, and I don't know, man, that was something else. And that's something else I forgot to mention about the DS as well, being able to mess around with like Picto Chat. And finally, December 17th, 2011, we received the PS Vita. Now we're gonna go ahead and break down the hardware first. We have the 1000 model and the 2000 model. Me personally, I have a 2000 model. And I did have a 1000 back in the day, but that's another thing where it's just like, in the last couple years, I'll say, hey, I want to pick up a 2000. So that's the one that I rock mainly. A couple deviations between the two are the reason why I prefer the 2000. So first off, the 1000, the back pad on the back, it's way too big. You end up touching it, and the grips are a lot smaller. So sometimes it's just, I don't know. It's like, it's one of those, it's very subjective. Some people find the 1000 to be more comfortable. Some people think the 2000 is more comfortable. Me, I fall into the 2000 camp. The 1000 does technically have an OLED, but it's not like the same OLEDs that you would get on like, modern displays. It's a bit of an older OLED, so there's that. There's also some infamous issues with like GPU crashes with the 1000, which isn't very fun. There's also sometimes screen artifacting in like very dark screens, which it never affects gameplay, but it has been noted, like if you kind of search into it a bit, there's some screen artifacting that can happen there. There's no internal storage, which means if you ever try to mod or homebrew the thing, there's a bit more that you have to do there. It's not too overly complicated, but still just like an extra step that you don't really feel like doing. Oh, and did I mention how big the back pad is? Yeah, I know that I mentioned it twice, but like, dude, on that 1000, I can't tell you how many times I was trying to play games and I ended up doing things I wasn't actually trying to do just because it was so big. But on this, it's like, it's in a reasonable place, way far away from the grips. It actually makes sense on this one. Not to mention the 1000 also has a proprietary charging port, which for me personally, like, you can get the third-party whatevers all you want, but I don't know, man. If I'm gonna get a proprietary thing, I would prefer to get first-party, just so then I know it's legit. It's all good. But obviously with it being proprietary from a longevity perspective, obviously those are only going to be in circulation or be working for so long till you have to rely on third-party stuff, and sometimes that stuff can be hit or miss. So with the 2000, obviously you just get that straight up that micro USB port. And overall, I don't know, I just always kind of preferred like the sleek look of the 2000. Oh, and not to mention again with the whole OLED thing we were talking about earlier, I hate overly saturated colors, and the PS Vita 1000 doesn't necessarily look overly saturated, but the colors are still just a bit too much for me and my brain sometimes, so I just prefer LCDs. That's me. Some people are going to clown on me for that, but I always prefer LCD over OLED. The PS Vita was basically just the PSP, but, just every complaint that anybody ever had about the PSP resolved. So, the analog sticks, there's two of them. I was going to list something else off, but yeah, that was literally the only complaint anybody ever had about the PSP, because the PSP was a perfect system as it was, but yeah, seriously. I mean, the PS Vita, I like, this is one of the, like, the 3DS, I was starting to run out of words, but the PS Vita, I mean, I'm literally at a loss for words. This system is so amazing. Whether you mod it, whether you don't, it's fully backwards compatible with the PSP. So if you can't afford, if it's again like the 2DS or the 3DS, if you have to choose between one of them, I say get a PS Vita, just because it's backwards compatible, so you can play all that stuff there. You can play PS1 games. If you homebrew it, there's so many emulators you can get. We're not even going to go into it right now. The library is absolutely amazing. Not to mention, we were getting PS3 level games on this thing. No, it's not just like, oh, the graphics look like PS. No, you were literally getting PS3 games on this thing. We saw things like Borderlands 2, Resident Evil Revelations 2, PlayStation All-Stars, Marvel vs. Combat, like Street Fighter X Tekken, like it goes on and on. There was literally like Need for Speed Most Wanted, like that was insane to see on here. And then there was other games which were like PS3 level, but again, they were just dedicated handheld games, which is one of the things that I really wanted to drive home with this video. Is I miss when these handhelds just kind of had like dedicated games made for them that just weren't being shared with consoles, because you were getting like unique experiences, and there was just always fun quirks and things about them where it was just like, there was something special about those unique experiences. But we got a lot of unique experiences still on the PS Vita. We got a lot of the handheld versions of the Lego games, like all the versions on here. None of them were the console versions. They were the handheld versions, which is fine because I would argue that these were the best versions of those handheld versions graphically and just, in terms of all that stuff. But we also got games like Call of Duty Black Ops Declassified, which is actually a lot of fun. Resistance Burning Skies, Uncharted Golden Abyss, which Uncharted Golden Abyss is always like one of my go-to games where if somebody asks me like, hey, like, why should I get a Vita? Like, what's so special about it? What is this thing capable of? Uncharted Golden Abyss. That is like one of my go-tos. And you had a lot of other innovative titles that use the PS Vita in unique ways, like Tearaway, for example. Always loved that game. Reality Fighters. And you had a lot of underrated gems, like specifically that come to mind, like Resogun. That's just like one of my favorite, like first-party Sony games where it's like, hey, man, this is a first-party Sony game and somehow like nobody ever talks about this. Resogun is absolutely amazing. Super Stardust, I absolutely love that game. And there's so many amazing games for the Vita. My brain is literally blanking just because like there's so like, we had like a spin-off Assassin's Creed 3 game on here, literally like open world there. Batman Arkham Origins Blackgate, which was like a 2.5D Arkham game. Literally had Dead or Alive 5 on here, which funnily enough, that was actually the way that I played this the game story mode for the first time. I played it on here. Mortal Kombat 9, we had that on here. Injustice. Unfortunately though, this system was not supported long-term in terms of first-party support, as you guys probably know, and it's ironic. PS Vita means life, and well, as far as first-party support is concerned, that life wasn't very long-lasting because Sony didn't maintain support for it for very long just because it wasn't selling that well. So after the first couple years, after we got some amazing first-party titles, like some of the ones that I listed, like Killzone Mercenary as well, that's another one where I point to, I'm like, that's what the PS Vita is capable of. They just kind of dropped support and it was left to the indies. But hey, you know what? There's nothing wrong with that because we got a lot of great indie games and just smaller budget titles and just the library there is also amazing for the system. You got stuff like Bloodstained Curse of the Moon, which is one of my favorite Metroidvanias of all time. Then you got amazing visual novels like Root Letter. That, oh my gosh. If you haven't played Root Letter before, if you haven't heard of it, I'd highly recommend that. Then we got other games on here. Like, there's so many great RPGs and JRPGs and ports of... Oh, that's another thing I forgot to talk about. We got so many, like, collections on here, like PS2 collections, like the Jak and Daxter collection, the God of War collection, the Metal Gear Solid HD collection, the Sly collection, Sly Cooper Thieves in Time, which, again, was literally a PS3 game. And there's just, like, the library for this thing. I could just go on and on because for as little first-party support as it got, for the first-party support it actually got, it was genuinely amazing. And even once that ended, once we got all the collections games that we were going to get, then, the third parties took over for a bit. We saw some other HD ports of collections like the Final Fantasy X HD, X and X2 HD remasters on here. And then, again, like the indies just kind of took over from there with stuff like Bloodstained, Root Letter, and just so many RPGs and JRPGs that came after that. Like, you could literally just look up underrated JRPG for the PS Vita, and you would just be, meted with a wellspring of games. Like, there's so many amazing RPGs and JRPGs on this system. Beyond RPGs and JRPGs, again, the indie scene is absolutely amazing out here. One game I want to give a shout out to is Age of Zombies. If you haven't played that one before, it's a goofy little game, but it's a twin-stick shooter, and it's a lot of fun, and the PS Vita, it's a shame that it couldn't be supported more, but I'm glad that it was supported for as long as it was at the very least, and I'm glad that the indie scene and the homebrew community has not only supported it for so long, but has been keeping it alive to this day, and I cannot recommend the Vita enough. No matter... whether you're looking for PSP games, PS Vita games, or looking to emulate other games, like, even like Game Boy Advance, you can do it all on the Vita. This is like one of the ultimate handhelds, in my opinion. And, other games that I wanted to mention that are just kind of randomly coming into my mind at this time, The Wolf Among Us and the Walking Dead games, like the Telltale ones, again, you can play those on here. So those are perfect for just laying in bed. We had like the Minecraft, it was like literally the PS3 and 360 version, but on here, and it was called the PS Vita edition. So yeah, the PS Vita, definitely one of my favorite handhelds of all time. It's hard for me to choose a favorite handheld out of all the ones we talked about, but man, the PS Vita, if you're looking for a way to play PSP or PS Vita games, or even a way to emulate other games like I was saying, man, the PS Vita, you can't go wrong with it. It is truly one of the most ultimate handhelds. But anyways, I know I've been yapping for a little while, so now I'd definitely love to hear from you guys. What are your thoughts on everything that we talked about? Did you have any of these handhelds? Do you still have any of these handhelds? Are you planning to pick any of them up? Do you have any nostalgia for any of these? Do you have any memories you want to talk about? Just literally whatever's on your mind after this, just, let me know. Do you guys agree with me? Also, do you guys miss these dedicated handhelds as well? Or do you think it's better that we're going in the direction of console gaming, but on the go? Again, just whatever it is, everything. Definitely love to hear from you guys. As many of you probably know, I'm a huge video game collector. I literally own hundreds of physical games in my collection. That being said, considering this is something that I've been doing for basically my entire life now, so like over 2 decades, there's definitely been some things that I've picked up on, some things that I've encountered, and just things that still kind of irk me to this day about video game collecting. There's many things I could have chosen from, but today I specifically 5 things above anything else that seriously irk me with a bit of a bonus thing in there, so let's just go ahead and get right into this. So the first thing, and I absolutely hate, fluctuating market slash secondhand market slash artificial, I guess, inflation of prices on those secondhand markets, whether it be through video game resellers like certain retro video game stores. Not all of them, just the ones where, you know, they care more about the money rather than the consumer. And then you have like eBay and Mercari, and the list goes on and on. There's 2 different kinds of sellers on these sites. You have the sellers where they're like, hey, you know, we're selling a bundle or a lot, whatever you want to call it, of video games. They'll sell it to you for a nice bargain while still allowing them to profit to a certain extent, and that's that. But then you also have the other ones where they're like, I heard this video game's starting to get a little rare, so then they try to just bump up that price just slightly, and then they push it further and further and further to see how far they can get away with it until we get to a point where, like, you know, the Spider-Man games are over MSRP by a wide margin, anywhere from being $60+ to $100+ in some cases. And I absolutely despise that. In the world of video games, I wish it was illegal for video games to ever go above MSRP, because at the very least, even if an older game was still going for $59.99 for some reason, like, hey, if like Spider-Man Web of Shadows on the PS3 was still $59.99, then I'd be like, hey, at least it's not above MSRP, at least I can pick it up, but in some cases, we've seen it go upwards of like 100+. Thankfully, that is a game that I own in my collection on multiple platforms, so I won't have to worry about that one in particular, but I do feel for the folks that haven't gotten to pick those games up. In fact, that goes for all the Spider-Man games. You know, obviously I've been following Spider-Man for my entire life, so I'm lucky enough to have like literally all of the Spider-Man games in my collection, so I don't have to worry about the artificial scarcity or, you know, like the prices or whatever that comes with trying to pick up the games on the secondhand market, whether that be in person or online. Another great example of this in recent times would have been Spec Ops: The Line, where it just got delisted off of the Xbox and PlayStation and PC marketplaces. And now it's like going for an egregious amount of money online, anywhere from like $30+ to $60+ in some cases. I've even seen for some listings, whereas a couple years ago, you know, I used to have the game on PS3 way back in the day, back at launch, but then, you know, just through with moves and stuff, I ended up, you know, losing that game over time, so I re-picked it up again like 2 or 3 years ago in the Xbox 360 to play through, because that game is an absolute masterpiece, and I got it for less than $10, and now, like, you know, I'm not the type of guy that ever sells my video games. Like, I don't care how much their value is. Literally, one of my games could be worth $1,000+, and I just wouldn't sell it. I buy my video games because I love them and have that emotional attachment to them. I will never sell them. But still, if I wanted to, I could flip it and sell it for literally like 5 to 8 times what I paid for it. And it's just, it's insane. And in my opinion, it's a little ridiculous. Now, this one isn't one of the things that I hate, but it is something that comes along with buying games online. And that is 2 different instances. False advertising, as well as just not showing you the entire picture. So I remember when I had just repurchased my PS3 a couple years ago, because again, had a PS3 back in the day, but due to some things, and, you know, parents splitting up, this, that, and the other, I just, you know, kind of lost that over time. And while I was repurchasing my PS3, obviously one of my main things was like, hey, I gotta rebuy all the Call of Duty games for the PS3, just because, you know, any console that I buy, if there's Call of Duty on it, I'm gonna buy it. I'm just, you know, I'm a sucker for the series. But anyway, one of the things that I bought was the Black Ops trilogy. Yes, I know the last gen version of Black Ops 3, people like to clown on it. Me, I kind of have some nostalgia for this version, and yes, I do still go back and play this, even though I have the Xbox, PC, and PlayStation versions of the game. Sometimes I pop it in for nostalgia because I didn't have a next-gen console, or what was next-gen console at the time that this game released. But anyway, when I bought the Black Ops trilogy, Black Ops 1 and 2, they showed up in phenomenal condition. In Black Ops 3, it seemed to be in phenomenal condition in all the pictures. But the one thing they didn't show or even mention in the description, and I went back and checked just to make sure, is the fact that there's a little crack in the case right there. As you can see, there's a little piece of it missing. Is it a huge deal? Well, kinda, because when it's on my shelf, this is the part that's sticking out. So I still want to buy a replacement case for this at some point. Not a top priority at the moment, because I'm still just going through and just trying to, you know, collect a bunch of other games for my PS3 at this point. But yeah, it's... To say that this irked me when I first got it would be understatement of the decade. So the second thing that irks me is artificial scarcity, and the first thing that comes to mind is Nintendo with Super Mario 3D All-Stars. And then this goes a little bit further with some things like limited run games and all those other things. Now, let me just get this out of the way. I love limited run games. Personally, I don't really buy that many limited run games. I believe I only have like maybe 1 or 2 limited run games in my collection. And, it's really one of those things where I support the idea of limited run games. It's just that I hate the fact that after they do these limited runs, the value of them on the market just shoots way up. Like, they are such a big company. I feel like if they could at least, like, you know, in some cases maybe at least double the print run they do, because sometimes they only do like 2,500 things for a game, and it's just like, huh? There are 7 billion people on this planet, and you're only gonna make 2,500 copies of this thing, and you know for a fact that some people are gonna pick up multiple copies and then they scalp them and, you know, do whatever with them. And again, it's nothing necessarily against limited run themselves or what they're trying to do. I fully support them, and yeah, it really doesn't even have anything to do with the company. It's just rather like, I don't know, there's something just about the stigma of like, hey, this is a limited run of a game, and then, I don't know, they put it out, and then the value just goes through the roof, and then at that point, it's like, yeah, sure, it's been preserved in some physical way, but at the same time, there's not really any way for people after the fact, if they weren't there. It's almost like FOMO, right? Like, if you don't order it in the moment, you're just gonna miss out on getting that game physically, like, forever, which does kind of suck. So I don't know, as you can tell, I'm very split on this. Like, in some instances, yes, I fully support the idea and I want them to keep doing these runs, but at the same time, I wish that maybe they could find a way to up production on them or just some way to balance out the market. I'm not really sure. And again, in the world of video game flipping and scummy resellers, it's just kind of an inevitability no matter, you know, what we're looking at, whether it's indie game limited runs or AAA games, you know, as we were just talking about before with things like Spec Ops: The Line and the Spider-Man games going up. It's just inevitability of the market, I suppose. Next up, this is a 2-in-1, but we're gonna kind of break it down from least worst to worst. So the first part of this, okay, let me just grab a PS3 game. Oh, look at this. Look at this absolutely beautiful case. You know, I could have even grabbed one of the original PS3 cases. I'm not sure which case I prefer. I like them both for different reasons. You know, the original PS3 where it says PlayStation 3 on the side is super nostalgic, and the red on top looks cool, but I must admit on the shelf, this PS3 thing right here, just all black all along, does look pretty clean. So, I don't know, like, they both look amazing in their own ways. But anyway, as you can see, a clean copy of Dark Souls 2, looks great on the side, looks great on the back, everything is beautiful. It looks great on the shelf, and then, this thing, this demonic creation, this mistake, greatest hits cases. Why? Why is it so red? Like, when it's on the shelf, like, when you have, like, you know, you're like me and you got like 20 of these things in a row, and then all of a sudden just this blood red time of the month case sitting there staring back at you. It's just, I don't know. And the sides, see, it's not even like, you know, like the black to line up with the PS3. It's kind of like this weird blood maroon red. And then usually these greatest hits cases, like, I could at least forgive it if the cover arts were the same, but usually they have like all this stuff just plastered all over it. So like, rather instead of then just getting like, you know, the cover art or whatever, one of the worst examples I can think of is like Batman Arkham City. I'll put a picture up on screen of like the original version of the game or the original cover art versus the greatest hits version. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous. It's one of those things that I go back and forth on, right? Because on one hand, it's like kind of cool. It's like, hey, this game earned its spot in the greatest hits thing. You know, it has a special case because it's like, hey, it sold really well. It's like one of the defining games of the generation or one of the best selling games of the generation, or at least it met like a certain threshold. So it was like, hey, it deserves this case. And in that aspect, I kind of respect it. And it's really cool to have games like that on the shelves. It's like, hey, yeah, that was like a great whatever. But at the same time, I'm the type of guy where I don't even care about getting certain editions of the game where it has like DLC on disc, which is another thing I kind of go back and forth on. Like, it's one of those things where I don't need that version of the game. Sometimes I'll even double dip and get a first print run of the game and then go back and get a version that has all the DLC on disc, just because I like having that first print run, like, cover art of the game, which is another thing kind of like with Batman Arkham City, like I was talking about, because there's actually two versions of that Game of the Year / greatest hits thing, where there's a normal black label one, which has that cover art with all the stuff on it that I don't really like as much as the original, but it does still have all the DLC on disc, and it is also a black label like this. But then there's another version that's a greatest hits, which has all of the same content on it. And while yes, technically the black label actually does have extra content over that greatest hits version, because the black label one does come with a code for the Batman Year One animated movie. At this point, if you pick up the game, it's more than likely either been used or is most definitely expired. There's no getting around that. So yeah, but regardless, you know, like, I feel like in the PS3 or the PS2 case, even, like, you know, it's like, okay, even though I would prefer to just have the first print run of the game with that original cover art, I can at least live with this. I'll never go out of my way to buy it, and I'll never intentionally buy it. In fact, this was one of those instances where I bought it on Amazon. It had a black label, and they sent me a greatest hits version. But it only gets worse the deeper that you dig into this. So again, we're going from least worst to worst. You know how the PS4 cases are blue normally with the nice blue thing on top? Here's my copy of Bloodborne. It's just, there's the red, and then the blue, and then the red again. PlayStation hits, and it's just, oh, you got the red. I mean, it's cool because it kind of lines up with the Bloodborne thing, but I mean, I will say this, right? Because the greatest hits version of the game, they changed the color to kind of line up with it, because normally it would just be like blue and white on the normal Bloodborne thing, so it's kind of cool in that sense, because it's like, almost like a special edition of the game. I do still want to get like a normal blue label version of this game at some point. This was another one, got it on Amazon. Ooh, Bloodborne, but then they sent me the PlayStation Hits version for some reason, even though that's not the one they had listed. But it gets even worse. If you go back to the early days of the Xbox 360, we have this monstrosity. What is this? There's literally a tear coming out of my eye, but the worst thing is that this isn't even as bad as it gets. You thought this was bad. Look at what GameStop gave me. They've been doing this for generations, and you know, I would say at some points it's almost been worse. I mean, like this, at least they got the logo on it. You know how PS2 games are supposed to look. Here's Final Fantasy X. It's an absolutely gorgeous game, ain't it? Oh, and actually, this is going to be relevant in a couple of seconds. You can't see it at the moment, but we're going to be talking about that in the next thing. But again, still just great copy of the game. Looks gorgeous. And then here's my copy of Star Wars Bounty Hunter. I just like I definitely need to order like at least a case for this game, because obviously, you know, I have the game. The game works, and I mean, it's just I at the very least, even if I don't get like a new case or copy for the game, I at least need to find a way to print out the official cover art just so I have something. I always prefer to have the original official printed cover art from the factory or whatever, but like if I can't find a case for this thing, I will literally just go to my printer. Anything is better than this. Next up, I actually have a couple examples that could work for this. Now, most of the times when I buy games, I peel these things off immediately just because I like having, again, my games being as default as possible. First print run of the game, nothing else on the case. No stickers, no stupid splashy text, nothing extra or crazy, just the game, the cover art as it's meant to be. But sometimes, well, not even just sometimes, just all the time, whenever you're shopping on eBay or Mercari or, you know, retro gaming stores, there's gonna be these GameStop stickers. And it's pretty bad when it's on the side of the games. I mean, I'd say actually no. It's even worse when it's on the front of the game and it's just like, you peel it. You know what? I take all that back. It's just bad no matter what. I wish putting these stickers on these games was illegal, because it always leaves that unless you peel it off within like the first like couple days of it being put on there. It's gonna be all the residue, and it's just like, come on, man. Especially for the retro game stores out there, it's like, don't you respect your games? Aren't you doing this because you love your games? Why are you destroying your games? This one I haven't even tried to peel off yet because it looks all gunky and gooey, so I already knew. I just know I'm gonna need some Goo Gone to get that off, and I mean, then we have the GameStop case once again. As you can see, ugly sticker. That's another one where it's like, you know, the case is so ugly that I don't even care. But then Final Fantasy X. I was able to get the sticker off, but unfortunately, all that residue was left behind, so I'm going to need Goo Gone regardless. And as you can see, you can probably even see it in the light. Yeah, you can see all the residue from the sticker right there. Like, yeah, I got the sticker off. It still looks pretty clean, but I'm still going to need Goo Gone, which at the end of the day isn't a huge deal because Goo Gone is only like, I don't know, $8 on eBay. Same thing on the back. I tried my best to get it off, but you can still kind of see it there. And see, normally what I do with games when I'm trying to get the sticker off is I'll use like a baby wipe or something like that, because as long as you just keep it on the plastic and you don't like, you got to make sure that none of the liquid or none of the wetness from the wipe actually like, you know, goes over the plastic onto the cover art, because that can damage it. But as long as you keep it on the outside, which I might even recommend just taking the cover art out completely before doing that, you just scrub it off. That'll help get the sticker off, and then afterwards you can hit it with some Goo Gone or something like that. Somehow I forgot to mention this in the video, but even worse than having these stickers on the cases is when the stickers are literally on the cover art. Now, I've had times where the stickers come off easily, but there's also been other times where they have not. And let me just say, never mind, I shouldn't say anything. I can feel my blood boiling. Let's just get back to the video. But I can't tell you how many games in my collection either have residue here or just have stickers still stuck on them. I'm just, you know, thankfully Goo Gone does exist, so there is a way to circumvent that, and I still gotta buy some, but yeah, just stickers, they gotta go. And finally, I am proud to say that I don't have any of these in my collection, though I almost could have if things went any worse. And I don't even know why these things exist. You know, these things are literally just, they're coasters after you buy them. That would be digital-only physical games. Now, granted, this is not a digital-only physical game. If I open it up, as you can see, the card is still in there. And by the way, Mario & Rabbids Kingdom Battle, this is just, both Mario & Rabbids Kingdom Battle and Sparks of Hope are both amazing games. If you haven't played them, or if you've just been kind of like eyeing them up, they go on sale like all the time. I've seen it as low as like 15 bucks, so definitely like pick up either Sparks of Hope or Kingdom Battle. But there is another edition of this game that literally has this huge sticker at the top. I'll put a picture up on screen that says like full digital game download code inside, and you literally open it up and there's nothing inside. Like, you'll open it up, and on the side, they'll have like a code right there, and then over here, it's the same thing where there's like a spot for the cartridge, but there's no cartridge. It's literally just the code, and that's it. To a certain extent, it's kind of cool having something like that, because then for certain games, like I think of Call of War as Gunslinger on the Nintendo Switch. I ended up just buying that one on the eShop for like $4 because I used to love that game back in the day on like, you know, like the Xbox 360 and stuff, and then I saw it on sale over on the Switch. I was like, well, let's see how it runs, and you know, surprisingly, it's almost like a remaster almost of like the Xbox 360 version, because I just found that interesting because there isn't even like an Xbox One or PS4 dedicated version out there, so technically the Switch would be the best version of that game, which is really interesting when you think about it that way. So in one sense, it's kind of cool getting these things, because for games like that or like Fortnite, like you can at least have something physical and tangible to hold, to be like, hey, here's the cover art, here's the back of the case, here's the side. Like, it's really cool still having something like that where like in any other circumstance you wouldn't be able to hold it, see the cover art there. But at the same time, you know, when it comes to buying physical games, anytime I'm buying physical, I would obviously prefer to actually just, you know, have the thing there, because when you use a code, you can only use it once, and then once it's used once, well, if something happens to your account, whether you get locked out of it, whether it gets banned for some reason, even if it's not your fault, or whether just licenses, whatever, you know, I mean, we've been hearing about that stuff all in the news where, you know, the companies are just trying to take away our games or other media or movies or shows or whatever, even though we paid for this stuff in the past, and then it just goes bye-bye. Whereas something like this, where you actually have the cartridge, you own that game forever until the end of time. And I mean, look at this right here, Star Wars Bounty Hunter. I picked this up in like what, I don't remember the exact year, sometime in the 2000s at GameStop. I mean, obviously, you know, it has like the PlayStation 2 case, so I don't even remember when they stopped selling PlayStation 2 games. I know it was a while ago, but you know, I've had this game, and I was literally just playing it like a couple weeks ago, and it still worked. Whereas if I would have bought the game digital, I mean, obviously there wasn't a digital store place for the PS2 or anything like that at the time, but if there was, you can already bet I probably wouldn't even be able to re-download it if I purchased it at the time, which, you know, that's the reason that I collect video games. That's the reason why I am all physical. Granted, sometimes I do buy digital games if it's, you know, a situation where like, hey, I'm trying to game share with somebody that I'm game shared with on Xbox, or if somebody else already, you know, bought it that I'm game shared with, then sure, I'll get it there. If there's like a subscription service like Game Pass, PlayStation Plus Extra, or Premium, which I am subscribed to all of those. I am subscribed to Nintendo Switch Online, PS Plus Premium, and Xbox Game Pass Ultimate. But anytime that I'm buying a game for my collection, I will 99.999% of the time get it physical, unless it's a situation where, like, say on Xbox, they have an Xbox 360 game that's on sale for like $3, whereas physically it costs you like, you know, above MSRP. At that point, it's like, hey, I just want to play this game. I'll get it for now, and if I see it drop down the line or somewhere like I feel like I really need it and I have the big baller bucks, then I'll spend it. But for the most part, just 99.9999999% of the time, I will always buy and navigate for physical in any and every situation, unless, again, it's a situation where it's so scalped on the secondhand market. But that's a very niche situation, so yeah, might as well just say 100% of the time, it's always better to go physical. But anyway, those are 5 things that kind of just irk me as a video game collector. So now I'd definitely love to hear from you guys. Is there anything in particular that kind of irks you about video game collecting? Like, whether I feel like I'm going to hear a lot about like the secondhand markets in the comments, like when it comes to like eBay and Mercari prices or just other stuff like that. I feel like we're going to see a lot of that, and that's totally okay. I share your frustration. This is a safe place. Doesn't matter what it is. Feel free to friend. I would love to hear from you guys. Before we get into this video, there is one thing that I gotta say. I am very salty because I was actually planning on making this video a long time ago. However, just a couple weeks ago, Scott the Woz had to make a video on his Scott Stash channel called Guinness World Records 2020 Gamers Edition, and I was really salty because I've literally been planning on making this video for like over a year at this point, but it is what it is. He beat me to it. I'm pretty sure I had the idea first, but it is what it is. If you didn't watch his video, go check it out because he did beat me to it. And furthermore, his was on the 2020 edition, so you know there's still reasons to watch this video and that video, and let's just be honest, his video is still going to be better regardless. If it wasn't obvious enough, my camera angles absolutely suck. I didn't have a better way to do this, so this is probably going to be a really awkward thing. We're not... Oh wait, is there a bookmark in here? See, I've had this book for so long that I literally still have the exact same bookmark that I got at the book fair that year. I always thought these things were so cool. They're kind of like holographic. They like change or whatever. But anyways, I bought this at the school book fair when are book fairs still a thing? I mean, they have to be a thing, right? I'm pretty sure my sister was just talking about one. It's gonna be a little hard to like, you know, actually like turn the pages and get like, again, good angles going here. Maybe I can try to like mess with my tripod a bit. Well, as soon as I tried to do that, everything started falling apart. So I don't know. I'm gonna do my best here. Again, I know the angles are kind of terrible, but just work with me. Now, we're not gonna be able to go through the entire thing in depth because, you know, the one Scott the Woz did, it was a bit more reasonable. But this is like an entire, like, whatever you want to call it. Like, there's a lot to this. This is like the 2012 Gamer's Bible. But at the very least, you know, we'll kind of just casually flip through this thing together. I'll point out the things I find interesting, and yeah, we'll just kind of go from there. We got the contents right here. Man, look at all this. We got, like, the introduction parts, the racing games, hardware, party games, shooting games. Ooh, party games. You can already see the Connect stuff right there. Like, that's the era that this was. Action adventure, sports games, fighting games, strategy and simulation, puzzle games, instant gaming. Wait, what's instant gaming? Critical Donkey Kong, classic arcade, modern arcade, alternate reality games, role-playing games, MMO games, top 50 game endings. Yeah, see, there's a lot to this thing. So again, we're gonna, like, we'll flip through every page together, but we're not necessarily gonna be reading, like, every single thing. Maybe if I see some interesting awards or something like that, I'll kind of point it out. Man, you can see some of the cosplay stuff up here. Best known among pro gamers, her tag of Kayani Marie Laure Narinder from France became the first woman to win a pro Street Fighter event at the Evolution Championship Series 2010 when she beat Solo Bernyorbra Adus. I'm sorry, I'm terrible at pronunciations. In the Women's Super Street Fighter 4 final. Oh, Street Fighter 4, that's definitely one of my favorite Street Fighters. Probably my second favorite behind Street Fighter 2. Don't get me wrong, I love Street Fighter 6. It's just, I'll be honest, it's a nostalgia thing. Met up with her dressed as Chun-Li, having some fun at the expense of Ken, Stuntman, and Skirmisher in London Chinatown ahead of EVO 2011. Check out page 112 to see who else she met there. Well, we'll get there in 112 pages. How to be a record breaker, then it's got all this stuff. But I mean, if you've ever read through a Guinness World Records book, specifically like the Gamers Edition, like, you know, the normal edition of Guinness World Records, I'll give it to them. Yeah, they got some really cool stuff, but when it comes to like the Gamers Edition specifically, there is so much strange stuff. Granted, in the 2012 edition, it wasn't as bad with some of the strange stuff. Like, it mostly happened later on just because, like, as Guinness has gone on, like, don't get me wrong, Guinness World Records is still obviously very relevant, but like, as we've gone on, and like, I'd say like from 2017 onwards, we've started to see this thing where like, they give the most strange awards out for like, just anything. For example, they'll have one where it's like, first Mario game to feature Mario without a hat for the longest amount of time. Like, it's really strange and bizarre kind of stuff like that. The Gamers Awards, the Shock and Awe Award for most Master Shock. Okay, well, here you see, even in 2012, they got stuff like this for Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, the campaign portion of Modern Warfare 3 for their builds. Okay, goes through all that. And apparently the runner-up was Battlefield 3, which, yeah, there was a lot of mass destruction in that one. I do remember that, but yeah, Modern Warfare 3, yeah, that's the one where there was literally, the opening level was like a whole city falling, and just, you know, that was the one with Makarov, obviously, as like the main central protagonist. So of course MW3 won that one. The Hot Stuff Award for Best Dragons went to Skyrim, though the runner-up was Dragon Age 2. Dragon Age is a super underrated series from BioWare. Absolutely love Dragon Age. The How Do You Do That award for the most difficult game going to Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time 3D, and then the runner-up was Dark Souls. How was the runner-up Dark Souls? That's like that's the meme. If anything, the winner should have been Dark Souls, and then they could have said that the runner-up was Ocarina of Time, and Ocarina of Time was like the Dark Souls of Legend of Zelda games. The Bwahahaha award for the most utterly evil supervillains. Batman Arkham City with Marvel vs. Capcom 3 on the runner-up. Another amazing game right there, Marvel vs. Capcom 3. But again, it's just like, man, what are some of these awards? The What's Going On for most clueless detective award. Like, is that really an award? Ghost Trick Phantom Detective? Really? That's another amazing series right there. It's a shame that more people don't talk about the Ghost Trick series. The Brown Trousers award for best scares. Dead Space 2 and Amnesia the Dark Descent. The Brown Trousers. I'm just gonna flip the page. Oh, that's right, Portal 2 for the PS3. That's when Valve made the commitment in saying that, like, hey, Portal 2, it's gonna be running the best on PS3. I always thought the console wars were pretty silly, right? Like, Xbox 360 versus PS3, PS2 versus Xbox, Xbox One versus PS4. Like, in my opinion, the games are so similar. Like, obviously, they're part of the same generation for a reason. It's because the hardware is comparable, and like, most of the times when it comes to these comparisons, except for some very niche examples, like if you look at Bayonetta on the Xbox 360 versus PS3, yeah, it's, oh man, the PlayStation Vita, one of my favorite handhelds of all time. It's a shame that Sony let that thing die. And funnily, well, not even funnily enough, but just like ironically enough, like a decade later, they're doing the same thing with PSVR 2, where it came out, it didn't exactly meet their sales expectations, and now they're already letting that VR helmet die, or a headset die, even though it literally just came out last year. Granted, I don't think PSVR 2 is going to die the same, like, dreadful death that the PS Vita did, because, like, the PS Vita in itself, it's an amazing handheld. You know, I still play mine to this day, absolutely love that handheld. handheld. It's just Sony neglected it. I don't think they're necessarily going to do the same thing with PSVR 2, but it does seem like they're kind of backing off support at the very least. So, you know, it is really sad to see that because it is a great headset. Granted, I don't really do a whole lot of VR playing just because, you know, I'm very, my gut's very weak, so I could never. But, you know, at the same time, like, from the things that I've watched and the things that I've seen, yeah, it's a solid headset, especially with like stuff with like RE4 VR. Like, yeah, that's awesome. RE4 Remake VR, sorry, I should have specified, because, you know, you have the original RE4 VR for like the Meta Quest, and you have the RE4 Remake VR for PSVR 2. Oh man, we got the original 3DS right there before, you know, the new 3D. Yeah, this actually would have been way before the new 3DS came out. So yeah, we didn't have like the little pencil eraser nub right there. Most times when I'm playing 3DS nowadays, I actually play on my 2DS. I don't know why. It's very reminiscent of like a Game Boy, I guess. So I guess that's just kind of why I gravitate towards it. There's nothing wrong with, you know, any of the 3DS models. It's just, you know, the 2DS is the one that I've reached for, I guess. Street Fighter 4 3D edition, still one of my favorite ways to play Street Fighter 4. Normally I either play it on my 360 or PS3, but I will say the 3DS is a really cool way to play that game. Pokemon Black and White, 3DS minigames, Street Pass Quest, oh my gosh, I remember that. Best of Mobile, what was happening in mobile this year? Oh yeah, we had stuff like Infinity Blade, man, that game was awesome, and it's funny because they were actually just talking about this like last week, I want to say, about that game finally being ported to PC, not officially by any means, but like through like emulation and just, you know, all that kind of fun stuff. So I'm definitely gonna be checking that one out because I used to love the Infinity Blade games back in the day on the App Store. They got the Xperia Play right here. I always thought this thing was interesting, right? Because it's obviously like very reminiscent of like a PSP Go, which the PSP Go in itself is always a very interesting system. Out of the whole PSP lineup, I must say the PSP 3000 is my absolute favorite, and that's the one that I play the most, though the PSP Go, it's pretty cool. One of the things I loved about the PSP was like the whole PSP Minis line, where we saw a lot of, like, there were some games that were releasing for like iOS or Android at the time that made their way to like the PSP Minis thing. Like, for example, I think of like the Nova games, which are essentially like, they were games developed and published by Gameloft, which were supposed to be like Halo type games, I guess you could say, for mobile. And yeah, I actually still have that on my PSP to this day. They had that and the Modern Combat series, which, oh, we were just talking about the console wars there, which, oh wow, I actually just realized I cut myself off when we were talking about that. I'll go back, I'll finish my thoughts on that in a minute. But yeah, they had that, and then like the Modern Combat games, which ironically enough, I actually have Modern Combat 5 on my Switch. I picked it up for like $2 when it was on sale. Some people don't go Gameloft, but I always loved Gameloft because I spent a lot of time on the App Store buying games, trying games. They had a lot of demos back in the day, but they made a lot of licensed games that I always enjoyed, like the Dark Knight Rises game, the Amazing Spider-Man game, and a bunch of that other stuff. I always thought the Gameloft games were cool. But yeah, even when I was a kid, I never engaged in the console wars just because I was like, man, who cares? They play the same stuff. And plus I was kind of biased because my parents were divorced, and on my mom's house I had a 360 and my dad's house I had a PS3, and I loved both consoles equally. They were both amazing in their own ways, and in their own ways, I mean, there was barely even a difference, right? Like, sure, I mean, only an exclusives front, sure, exclusives is a whole other conversation, but that's not even the conversation that most people were having back in the day. Back in the day, in school, everybody was like, well, yeah, mine plays at like higher, better graphic settings, even though nobody actually understood like resolutions and frame rates. Well, you know, at least when it came to like the majority of people, some people were just like, hey, this one looks like it has better graphics, even though realistically speaking, when you go back and look at these, like nowadays, like when you go back and look at the old like Lens of Truth articles or like the Eurogamer articles, like yeah, 9 times out of 10 they were like 99% identical anyway. Again, there was some rare examples like Bayonetta, or like, hey, the 360 version might have had more screen tearing, the PS3 might have had a lower FPS sometimes, but like overall, if you're picking up a game, you can't go wrong with either system. Fastest selling video game, Call of Duty Black Ops. Most prolific FPS series, holder going to Battlefield. You think that would be something like Call of Duty, with 19 entries in the series, including expansion spin-offs. The Battlefield franchise is the most prolific. Yeah, okay, yeah, that definitely, if that's the, like, the criteria to be the most prolific, then Call of Duty has definitely stomped that out with all the, like, different, like, spin-offs. And we got, like, Call of Duty Heroes and Strike Team on mobile. Then you got all this stuff with, like, Call of Duty Online, Call of Duty Mobile. Then you got literally, like, 20 mainline just like yearly releases at this point. Then you got all the other spin-offs from back in the day, like Call of Duty 2 Big Red One and Finest Hour. Most guns in a video game. Borderlands, man. Borderlands 1 is just super duper nostalgic for me. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely adore all of the Borderlands games, like Borderlands 2, 3, pre-sequel, the Tales from the Borderlands games. Like, I just love the Borderlands universe, but it's just, you know, when it comes to like nostalgia factor, I have so much nostalgia for the first game. Most character customization options in a shooting game. Brink is one that was like super underrated and is still super underrated to this day. In fact, it's free to play on Steam. Such an amazing game, whether you're playing multiplayer, which I don't even know if people still play the game multiplayer nowadays, but there was like a full campaign you could play with like 2 different sides. You could either save the arc or escape the arc, and that was just, it was always super cool. It doesn't take too long to beat, but it's definitely worth playing through, especially since it's free to play on PC. Most critically acclaimed PSP shooter, Siphon Filter Dark Mirror. Doesn't surprise me, that game's amazing. First game to feature rocket sliding. Holder goes to Vanquish. Man, if it was 4 years later or 3 years later, that could have went to like Titanfall. Vanquish was super cool though, just a super stylish game. Like, it's one of those like 7th gen games. You know, like when you see a 7th gen game, you know it, and it's just over the top, bombastic, flashy graphical effects. It's just, Vanquish is so amazing. Longest running PlayStation franchise, Twisted Metal. Yeah, you might want to update this one, Chief. First cover-based shooter goes to Kill Switch in 2003. Sorry, Gears of War, they beat you to it. Got some 2D shooters, Radiant Silvergun, amazing game. Geometry Wars, yeah, that's what I'm talking about, baby. Most popular game is Team Fortress 2. Wow, yeah, that's definitely changed, because now that would go to technically, like, what, PUBG was the most popular, followed up by Palworld. Rail shooters, man, every time I think rail shooters, I just think back to the Wii and all the amazing ones on there, like Sin and Punishment, like the Resident Evil Chronicles games on the Wii. Though the Wii was just like a haven for just amazing rail shooters. Fastest pre-ordered Xbox 360 title, Gears of War 3, doesn't surprise me. That game was absolutely amazing. Sports games, I mean, you know, when it comes to sports games, I still play NBA Jam to this day. I love NBA Jam on the SNES, and I also actually, my mom just picked up the NBA Jam released on Xbox 360 back in the day, so me and her were actually just playing that last weekend. So yeah, when it comes to sports games, like those are the ones that I kind of gravitate towards. Don't get me, I don't have anything against these more realistic ones. Like sometimes, hey, you know, I'll try out like the new Madden if it's on Game Pass, but you know, it's not something I'll go out of my way to like necessarily buy unless it's like a cheaper one from a previous generation where it's like, hey, it's part of a bigger lot or it's on sale for like $2, so why not? I'm the type of guy as a video game collector where it's like, I'll buy just about anything. It doesn't matter if the price is a little up there or if it's, you know, super cheap or whatever. Just, you know, if it looks like something I'll play, not even just something I'll play, it's just like, hey man, if I look at it, I'll probably pick it up. You know, I'm the type of guy, I'm down to try literally anything. Doesn't matter if it's a sports game, doesn't matter if it's like Nintendogs, doesn't matter if it's a first-person shooter, doesn't matter if it's a racing game. Speaking of racing game, Forza Motorsport 4, most critically acclaimed Xbox 360 racing game, Forza Motorsport 3. Speaking of racing games during that generation, Split Second is a super underrated one that more people need to check out. Yeah, I'm down to try literally anything, you know, like I always document like what games I've been playing, and it's always such a wide variety. Oh yes, the Trials games, always love the Trials games. I still have Trials HD and Evolution downloaded on my 360 to this day. I've kept up with the series, you know, playing through like Fusion and Rising and all that, and yeah, the series never disappoints. It's always a ton of fun. Longest wheelie on Burnout Paradise, yeah, that's awesome. But sometimes I'll be playing stuff on Atari, other days I'll be on the Wii, other days I'll be on the Wii U, the Switch, or the PlayStation, or I'll be playing something from the Game Gear days. Like, I'm always just all over the place, you know, maybe even TurboGrafx 16. It doesn't matter what the game is, who it was made by, when it was made. It literally, if it's a video game, I will give it a shot, I will play it. And I'm the type of guy where if I start something, I can't just stop it, because then that just feels like, wait, you know, like the whole sunken time fallacy thing or whatever it's called. So I'm the type of guy where it's like, hey, I'll try anything, but also once I start something, I'm not going to stop until it's finished. So yeah, it's just, there's so many times where it's like, hey, I'm going to try out this game. Next thing you know, like the next day, I'm like, oh, well, now I'm rolling the credits. That was fun. What's the saying? Variety is the spice of life. Oh boy, we're getting into the whole Avatar me era thing here. It's crazy looking back just how hard they were pushing this whole Kinect thing. Like, it truly was a different time. Kinect Sports being made by Rare. Yeah, man, Microsoft bought up Rare, and the next thing you know, they're making like an Kinect Sports game. I mean, I know the acquisition happened years before this, but it's just crazy. They went from making games like Donkey Kong Country and GoldenEye to Kinect Sports. Nothing against Kinect Sports though. I remember playing that with my buddy back in the day. We actually had a lot of fun with that one. Wii Fit, oh man, yeah, that was one of those games where I was like, hey man, I'm gonna buy this, I'm gonna start working out. Next thing you know, like the Wii Fit and Wii Sports thing, it was almost like a gateway drug in a sense, to where like you buy that, or you see like older folks buying it. Next thing you know, like a week later, you know, they already dropped their workout routines. They're like, yeah, you know, try Wii Fit for a week, and then it's just, yeah, a week later, then they're playing like New Super Mario Bros. And Mario Kart Wii and stuff like that. It's just like, oh, working out, oh, I don't know nothing about that. I'm working out my thumbs now. Most people exercising to a video game, it was to get fit with Mel B. Wow. Augmented reality. Yeah, it's crazy how we kind of evolved from like the whole AR thing up to like VR, because I remember so many apps being on the App Store back in the day where I was like, you know, try this AR thing. Like I remember the one when the Amazing Spider-Man movie was coming out, like the reboot one, you know, they had that whole thing. Oh, rhythm instrument games, yeah, guitar, man. These really need to come back, like Guitar Hero, Rock Band. But I remember when like the Amazing Spider-Man reboot movies were coming out and they had like the whole AR thing you can do. They had some like cool thing where you get, I honestly can't even remember what it was exactly, but it was like some sort of AR app. I always thought that stuff was pretty cool. But right here we got the top 10 best-selling Xbox Rock Band tracks, All the Small Things, Move Along, Dirty Little Secret, The Kill, Bury Me, man. For those that don't know, the same person that played Morbius, you know, Jared Leto, yeah, he's also the lead singer of 30 Seconds to Mars. It's just, it's Morbin time. Buddy Holly, BYOB, Don't Stop Believing, Toxicity. Oh man, I'm glad to see so much System of a Down on here. Jukebox Hero, Crush 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 by Paramore. Man, that awesome lineup right there. Music is another situation for me where it's like, people are always like, what's your favorite? Oh, Just Dance. It's crazy how it was just like Just Dance 2 back in 2010, and now we're on like Just Dance like 474. People are always like, what's your favorite kind of music? And I'm like, oh, you know, I like some dubstep. Oh, gaming fails, man. E.T. deserved better. I listen to metal, rap, dubstep, country, electronic, party. Like, I listen to literally anything and everything. That's the kind of guy I am with literally anything in my life. Oh yeah, I just realized I cut myself again further back. I have a bad habit of that, right? Like, I'll start saying something, but then I cut myself off and never go back to finish my thoughts. But like, you know, they say like variety is the spice of life or whatever. Best-selling 3DS game, Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time 3D. That kind of surprises me, yet at the same time it doesn't, because like it's a remake, but at the same time I guarantee that that's not the case. I guarantee it's probably like, you know, one of the Mario games on there, because I mean this was released in 2012, so you know there was like a whole half a decade beyond that. But as I say, you know, like variety is the spice of life, and yeah, you know, I'm down to try literally anything, whether it be like movies, games, music. I love always trying new things. I always have an open mind. As I say, like, don't judge a book by its cover, you know, like it's one of those things where it's like, hey, this thing looks cool, I'm gonna dive into it, play it, and you know, it doesn't matter what it is. If there's something I see, I'm just like, hey, sure, I'll try it. I just love keeping an open mind, because who knows, like, you know, when you have an open mind like that, it might lead to you like just, you know, finding your new favorite game or your new favorite band or your new favorite movie, or it might lead to you finding an absolute catastrophe. Like, if you have that mindset and end up stumbling across like Kong Rise of Skull Island, like, oh, I like King Kong, then you buy that, try to have an open mind, okay, that might be a different situation there. But regardless, at least you could say you had that experience. At least there's a story to be told there. Also, Assassin's Creed, Ubisoft, 2007 to the present, best-selling modern franchise. Yeah, it's crazy how we're almost 2 decades beyond that, and now there's like, there's Assassin's Creed books, there's movies, there's the mangas. Which, let me just say, the Assassin's Creed mangas are pretty good. And also, while we're talking about Assassin's Creed, there's a few things I wanted to highlight. Altair's Chronicles, either on mobile or on DS, absolutely amazing game there. Bloodlines on the PSP, another great one there. Assassin's Creed 2 Discovery on the DS, another great one there. Assassin's Creed 3 Liberation on the Vita, definitely one worth playing. I'm sorry, I love my handheld devices, and anytime that I get the opportunity to kind of chill and just like to, you know, talk about some amazing games on those platforms, I always try to do it, because while the Nintendo Switch and the Steam Deck and all these new handhelds are cool, I miss that era of those handheld games that got their own dedicated games, like the DS and the PSP and the Vita and stuff like that. So, you know, anytime I get, I always try to just, you know, give some love to those consoles. Hopefully we can see them return one day. You know, console gaming on the go is cool and all, but I really miss those dedicated handhelds. Dead Island, man, that game's absolutely amazing. I'm so glad Dead Island 2 finally came out. I was literally waiting for that game for almost an entire decade. From the time it was announced until it finally released, I was waiting that entire time. Thankfully, it didn't disappoint. Absolutely love that game, and also at the same time, I'm also just really hard to disappoint. Like, I can't think of a single game I've ever played where I was like, oh yeah, I didn't like that, or it disappointed me. Like, I'm the type of guy, I take things at face value for what they are without any like preconceived notions or biases or like preconceptions. I just go into a game, play it, enjoy it for what it is, and you know, I'm not the type of guy that tries to put a score next to something or is like, oh, did I enjoy that? Didn't I? It's just like, oh yeah, I played that game and I had fun with it, and it doesn't need to go beyond that. It ain't that deep, you know. Like, games are it's a game, it's fun. Or in some cases, like The Last of Us, you know, it's still a fun game, but it also made me cry like 5 gallons worth of tears. But hey, you know, it's still one of my top 5 favorite games of all time, so there's that. Also, best-selling independently developed sandbox game, Minecraft. Yeah, literally the best-selling game of all time now. GTA Chinatown Wars, most formats for a handheld open world title. It appeared on the DS, the PSP, and iOS. Chinatown Wars, man, I would love to. I don't even need a remaster or remake for it. I would just love to see it get ported up to new consoles. That game was amazing. We got Uncharted right there. Most prolific voice actor, Nolan North. Yeah, he definitely deserves that. Nolan North is absolutely amazing. Now, nowadays, I wonder if that would go to Nolan North or Troy Baker, because they've both been in a lot of stuff. Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell trilogy, Alpha Protocol. Man, it's so sad that one flew below the radar. That game was amazing. Doctor Who, the adventure games. Resident Evil 4. I used to always love just flipping to this page because I love seeing the screenshot there of Leon. Resident Evil 4 is literally my favorite game of all time, and the remake is now tied with the original as my favorite game of all time. I love Resident Evil 4 so much. Deadly Premonition. That game deserves way more love. That game is just, I actually absolutely love that game. 2D platformers. We got Explosion, man. Oh man, it's been years since I played that one. That one was actually great. Terraria. Super Meat Boy down there. What do we got over here? Epic Mickey. Yeah, we're actually getting the remake of that soon. Epic Mickey Rebrushed. Super excited for that. Both the Epic Mickey games on the Wii were just so much fun. Sure, I know Epic Mickey 2 definitely came out, you know, obviously came out on the other consoles too, but I don't know. I just felt like Epic Mickey 2 always felt at home on the Wii, just considering the first game was exclusive there. Let's see, we got the Sly Collection down there, another one that has to come back. Most pirated 3D platformer holder goes to Super Mario Galaxy 2. Super Mario Galaxy 2 was downloaded over 1.4 million times. Man, those numbers are out of this world, but oh gosh. LA End War, another amazing game right there by Rockstar. Rockstar never misses, let's be honest. Now we're into the fighting game section. I always love these cosplay sections in here. I love cosplay in general. I always just love like the just pure passion and just like how cool it looks seeing like my favorite video game characters just like brought to life like this. Marvel vs. Capcom 2 right there. I always thought that that was such a cool concept, Marvel vs. Capcom, because it's one of those things where it's like, sure, Capcom isn't necessarily like superheroes in the same way, but it's almost like they already got things like Chris Redfield in there, for example, where it's like he's almost like a superhuman. I mean, dude's literally punching boulders. So I always just thought that that was cool. We got the longest online winning streak in Mortal Kombat held by Futin462. What's this? An impressive 378 online matches without a single loss. That is insane. Dead or Alive 4, man, I absolutely love the Dead or Alive series. It's one of those games where it's like, yeah, sure, I do play just for fun, but I also just love blasting through the story modes. I remember when Dead or Alive 5 came out, I literally blasted through the entire story mode in one sitting just because it was awesome. Got God of War 3 right there. I always thought that that screenshot was so freaking cool, like having like Kratos right there, like, you know, like twisting the guys, like that is just so cool. Most concurrent players in an MMO beat 'em up, Dungeon Fighter Online. I wonder if that stole the record for that. Highest Xbox 360 Famitsu score goes to Bayonetta. Yeah, we were just talking about that one earlier, how like if you're gonna play that game, I mean, it's definitely playable on the PS3, but oh, it's Scribble Nuts, yes! Such a cool concept for the game. And I remember I spent so much time with this game on my DS, because it's just like, it's one of those things where it's like, man, it's so creative. Like, you type gun, you get a gun. You type ladder, you get a ladder. Like, it's so cool. And then when they put it on the Wii U, that was another situation where it's like, yeah, that game, like, it was made for the Wii U or the DS or just like any sort of device like that. Like, yeah, sure, it works on other consoles and platforms, but it's just like, when you play it on those devices, it really gives you like that special feeling, you know? Got Angry Birds right there. Man, it's sad that they delisted the original one, because, you know, it was pretty obvious they only, oh man, we're getting into the whole Candy Crush section now. That's a whole conference. The Candy Crush and the history behind that game could get a whole video on its own, but it's sad how they kind of delisted the classic Angry Birds, because they're literally delisting their history just so then they can profit off of like the microtransactions in Angry Birds 2, because obviously with the original, it's only like a $1 purchase and you have access to the full game, whereas Angry Birds 2, it's a free game, but there's more microtransactions, which means they're more likely to make more money overall, like over time or whatever. We got Portal 2 right here, again, just one of the one we were actually just talking about earlier, where Valve was like, yeah, it's gonna play the best on the PS3, when in reality, I've played the game on both PS3 and Xbox 360, and it's literally, once again, completely identical. Most popular logic puzzle game on Facebook, Mahjong Trails. And then we got the whole Star Wars section. I am an absolute... See, it's one of those things where I want to talk about this, but I'm such a massive Star Wars fan that I will literally sit here gushing for the next 30 minutes about all sorts of different Star Wars lore and media and games and stuff. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hold this here. I'm gonna hold myself back from gushing. I'll let you guys get a good look at it. You can pause it and read it. Otherwise, I think I gotta turn the page, because man, I'm seeing so much stuff here, like The Force Unleashed 2. Man, I'll never, like, oh, okay, you know, I can't help it. Here we go. The Force Unleashed 2. Speaking of The Force Unleashed, could we ever get a Force Unleashed 3? Maybe just like, you know, re-release the games in like a cool combo pack just so more people can experience them or something. It's like, man, let me tell you, but by the time that we got to the end of The Force Unleashed 2 with that final battle, yeah, I don't want to spoil it just in case anybody hasn't played it, but I will just say, like, the final battle in that game with the QTEs and all the action, oh my gosh, it still gives me chills anytime I replay that game to this day. Republic Commando, such a cool concept for a game. Rogue Squadron, oh man, it's so cool to me that like Rogue Squadron kind of got to live on through like Star Wars Squadrons in a way. I remember waiting years and I was unsure if we were ever going to get another game like that, but then when they announced Star Wars Squadron, I was like, oh yes, because the closest thing we had that obviously would have been like the flight sections in the Battlefront games, especially like Battlefront 2, which thankfully that game's still alive to this day. The flight stuff was pretty cool in that game, but yeah, Star Wars Squadrons was super excited when that finally released, and yeah, man, just it definitely felt like a nice homage to those classic like Rogue Squadron games right there. But yeah, there's like so much I could go on about here. Lego Star Wars: The Complete Saga, Knights of the Old Republic, and thankfully they literally just announced that the development for Knights of the Old Republic, the remake, will be resuming, or will be like picking up or continuing or whatever, which is amazing because obviously it was like unsure if it was getting canceled for a while, but thankfully it's sticking around. And again, Lego Star Wars: The Complete Saga, I mean, there's so much I could say about that. I played that game on literally any platform it was released for: PC, mobile, PS3, Xbox 360, Wii, DS. If there was a way to play that game, I made sure I played it and got the achievements or completion or whatever on any platform that I could. I love that game. Now we're into the role-playing games, largest competitive Pokemon video game family. Pokemon Bread and Greed are the best-selling handheld RPGs. I wonder what that would be nowadays. I wonder if Gen 1 is still the best-selling one, but then we got like a fastest-selling DS game, Black and White. Actually, now that I think of it, I bet one of the ones on the Switch would be, just because, I mean, it's the Nintendo Switch. Longest development time for an RPG, Diablo 3, what was that? Has been in development for 10 years and counting. I bet that that's definitely gone up since then, but then we got stuff, best-selling Wii RPG holder, Monster Hunter Tri, and then that ended up getting re-released for the 3DS and Wii U simultaneously with Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, which I always thought that was so cool, how like you could like take your save from the 3DS and then put on the Wii U and just go back, and like it was so cool. Most prolific role-playing game series, Final Fantasy. Most endings in a Japanese RPG, Chrono Trigger DS. Largest Xbox 360 game, Lost Odyssey. Another great one that always flows below the radar. Let's see. Oh, Western RPGs. Now we're getting into stuff like Mass Effect and Obsidian Entertainment down here. Most prolific developer of RPG sequels. That's another instance where the award is kind of bizarre, but like I'll excuse it just because yeah, Obsidian deserves it, man. Like with like Fallout New Vegas, and they went on to make like the Outer Worlds and Pentiment and stuff. I mean, I know Pentiment's less of an RPG, but still that game's just great overall. I love Obsidian. Longest running strategy RPG series, Fire Emblem. I still wonder if that's the case, because I mean, Fire Emblem is still going, but I wonder if there's one that's been running technically longer than that. Most strategy RPGs on a single system for the PS2. I bet that that's probably like, that'll probably go to the Nintendo Switch nowadays. Biggest MMO hack goes to Sony Online Entertainment. Biggest MMO hack, I think you just mean like biggest hack overall. if you know what I mean, you know what I mean. Ultima Online, then we got all the other fantasy MMO RPGs. I'm gonna be honest, like I used to play a ton of MMOs back in the day. Nowadays I don't play as many of them. Like I still dive into them from time to time. Like I guess you can count like what, Elder Scrolls Online and like Final Fantasy 14 and stuff like that. Like I still dive in and play those from time to time, but it's one of those time to time things. Like they're not like the games that I like main all day. Like, you know, this some people do where it's literally like all day play. Like, you know, like I was saying before, variety is the spice of life. So I usually don't commit to like one MMO for a long period of time unless it's one that like really sucks me in. But you know what I mean? Like it's one of those things where I enjoy them, but I don't invest my entire existence into just one game. APB, man, it's a shame what happened to that game, because that game, you know, it had potential, and even when it came out, I thought, oh, Cityville, I remember that one. It's always crazy seeing like what was big at the time and then looking back at it now through like, you know, like a decade later, a decade plus later, and just being like, man, what even happened to that game? Because at release, like I always thought APB was a lot of fun. It was just like, I don't know, from like a performance perspective, and when it comes to some of the content and the overall stability and community around the game, like don't get me wrong, oh, Command & Conquer, yes, man, I still play the PS1, both Command & Conquer 1 and Red Alert on the PS1. Both of those, I play those all the time to this day. I love going back to those games. Most deaths in a simulation game, DEF CON. How many deaths are we looking at here? In DEF CON, the player can cause the virtual deaths of billions of people through the use of nuclear weapons. First street cleaning simulator, holder goes to street cleaning simulator. Like, this is what I'm talking about, man. Anybody could get this award with like how Steam is and the eShop nowadays. Life simulators, fastest growing online pet sim, Moshi Monsters. I had a Moshi Monster. Most critically acclaimed life sim, The Sims. I mean, of course. And we have the instant gaming, largest Pac-Man video game, the world's biggest Pac-Man. Donkey Kong, largest Donkey Kong high score competition. The Kong Off, highest score on Donkey Kong. What was the score? The previous record of 1,064,500 points was set by Weeby on August 30th, 2010, while Mitchell's best score is the 1,062,800 points he recorded on July 31st, 2010. Yeah, that's a whole situation there. There's always a lot of controversy with like the whole Billy Mitchell thing. We're not even gonna talk about, I don't know. I honestly don't even care. The way I see it, the universe works in funny ways, and whoever deserves a certain outcome will get their outcome. So if like somebody is legit or isn't legit, they'll get what they deserve at one point or another. They'll be exposed at one point or another, or they won't be. If they deserve to be exposed, they will be. If they don't deserve to be exposed, then they never will be. That's how the universe works. Things always kind of work out that way, which is why I live by the motto that you should always be like 110% honest and true, not only with everybody else, but also with yourself. You know, I'm the type of guy, I literally never lie about anything. I can't lie. I'm physically like incapable of lying. It's just something with me like morally on the inside. It literally eats away at me anytime that I even try to lie. So I don't. And that goes beyond lying. I'm just like, even just doing like wrong or cruel acts towards other people, or just like mean stuff in general. I just don't have it in me to really do stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like maybe it's just because I've been through a lot in my life. Oh, boy, we guys got the top 50 game endings here. I'm not going to read too much of the stuff just because I don't want to, there might be like spoilers for some of the stuff here, so I don't want to read through it, but you know, you can just kind of see some of the stuff there. But it's one of those things where it's just like, I'm the type of guy where like, you know, I know how it feels to have stuff done to me, so I can't do it to other people, because it's one of those things where it's like, if I do something bad, I'm going to be thinking about it and genuinely feeling bad about it, and it'll literally like keep me up at night. So, you know, I always do the best by not just myself, but also by everybody else as possible. We got the scoreboards here, and then yeah, this just kind of goes on to like a whole lot of stuff here, not a whole lot of pictures to look at here, just, you know, whole lot of numbers and stuff like that. Splatterhouse, man, that's a classic. But with that, it seems like we are just about maybe at the end of the, oh wait, no, we have one more thing. So we got the scoreboards and we got the esports league tables, StarCraft, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, and bunch of other stuff here, Street Fighter, Marvel vs. Capcom, Mortal Kombat, Halo Reach, and yeah, I just got like the leaderboards for some of the players there. It's funny, because nowadays if you try to look at those same leaderboards, most of those are like hacked into oblivion. Then at the end we got the index, and I'm pretty sure that that is the end of the Guinness World Records 2012 Gamers Edition. Like I said, I've had this idea for over a year, but then like Scott the Wasp kind of beat me to it in his Scott Stash video where he went through the 2021, but I was like, hey, it is what it is. I mean, you know, it's one of those things where this is a different edition after all, and I've had this idea for so long that it's like, hey, why scrap it? If I want to do it, I might as well just go for it and do it. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed, and if you want more videos like this, then just let me know, because I had a lot of fun making this, and I'd totally be down to make more. You can tell this is from 2012. They literally had Nom Nom from Cut the Rope on the front cover. For the longest time now, I've always had people asking me like, hey, how do I get into video game collecting? Where should I start? Where do I buy things? And today I just kind of wanted to give you guys a couple of tips on how to get into game collecting. And even if you already game collect, or even if you consider yourself to be somewhat knowledgeable about game collecting, who knows? Maybe there's something in this video that even you could find useful. So the very first tip that I have for you guys would be to learn the market and also learn reasonable game prices. So say we look at a game like Dark Souls 2 here, right? Like usually when you get this game on eBay, you can get it for anywhere between like $8 to $15 depending on the seller, depending on the condition, depending on whether or not it's CIB. But on the other hand, you might also find some super scummy seller on that same site or on Macari or maybe even at like a garage sale that's trying to sell this game to you for like $30. And I can tell you right now, in no universe should you be spending $30 on a copy of Dark Souls 2. I'm not even talking about like the game's quality, I'm just talking about like the game's value. If it's sealed, that's a different situation. But you know, when we're talking about just like a used copy that's already been opened, like just learn your prices and learn what games are actually worth. There's tons of prices out there like videogamepricecharting.com, that's a great one. And even beyond that, if you're ever out in public or if you're just trying to get like an average on like, okay, what do these games go for? Literally just search it up on eBay or Macari, and usually what I do is I search from like the lowest price plus shipping and then just kind of go from there, because you really want to try to find the best bang for buck while also getting a good condition game. So usually what I look for is a game that's clean with minimal stickers. Like if it's covered in stickers, I won't go for it, but if there's only 1 or 2 stickers but it's for a good price, I'll still pick it up. And just, you know, even if there is some sticker residue, what you can do then is order some Goo Gone off our Amazon, and then, you know, that'll take it off and it's almost like a brand new copy at that point. And then in the long term, you'll be saving yourself a ton of money if you can do that, speaking from experience. So while you want to learn the prices so then on one hand you can't get scammed and have somebody try to sell you a game that's, you know, like for way more than it's actually worth, you also want to learn the prices, because then who knows, you might be able to find a game for a steal of a price for like a fraction of the cost that it normally goes for online. So it can really benefit you both ways. In one way, so you don't get scammed, but also you might be able to find some really good deals that way. And plus, if you would ever want to open up your own store, start your own eBay store, and just start selling video games, obviously at that point, then you would really want to learn the market, because, you know, when you're getting into a business, it's the most important thing. The first thing you should do is learn the market and learn the pricing of everything. TLDR, or I guess in this case, TLDW. Learn your prices and always get things for as cheap as possible, but in as best of condition as possible. My next tip would be to find retro game stores near you. Now, for the longest time, I only collected exclusively online. Like 95% of my collection, and I'd say actually more like 80% of my collection that I have right now, I just acquired through like buying stuff off of eBay, Macari, Amazon, etc. But I can tell you, because lately, you know, in the last couple weeks and months and stuff like that, you know, I've been trying to go outside of my comfort zone, look for some retro game stores near me, and man, some of the prices, some of the bundles, some of the deals that you can find at these retro game stores is pretty insane. One retro game store near me that I go to all the time, you know, I go out there and I find games I normally go for anywhere from like $8 to $12 for like $3 or $4 there. And it might not sound like that big of a difference, but you gotta remember, that's literally 50% of the price, and that adds up over time, because at that point, when it comes to like how far your money can go, say I only have $10 to spend on one game on eBay, or I could go to that store and get three $3 games. And in literally every case, when I go to that retro game store, like I compare the prices online to that, and it's like, yeah, I can either buy it for $10 on eBay or buy it for $3 here. Like for example, I went there the one day to pick up like Skyrim, Rage, and then Battlefield Bad Company, and like all together, if I would have got those separately on eBay, at minimum, I would have been looking at like $20 if I would have had to buy everything separately. But instead, I was able to get Bad Company for like $5, Skyrim for $3, Rage for like $5. And that $20 on eBay was being generous. If anything, it would probably be more like 25 to 30 if we're being honest. And plus, when it comes to buying off of people on eBay or Macari, while it is always good to do that, because at that point, like, you know, you for the most part, you are usually supporting smaller businesses or independent sellers that could really use the money or are really trying to do something cool on eBay. Sometimes you also gotta be careful, because there is also just a lot of scummy people trying to just get get as much money out of you as possible. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword there. But for the most part, if you can find a good retro game store near you, not only is it great for your wallet, but you also get to support a small business, which is awesome. But at the same time, like I said, like always look for those retro game stores, but also don't be afraid of buying off of eBay or Mercari. Like if you do find a good deal on there, or it's just like, hey, it isn't that much and I really don't feel like leaving my house right now, or I don't feel like leaving my house, period, there's nothing wrong with that. Like even me, I literally, even though I just visited a retro game store yesterday, they didn't even necessarily have the one game I was looking for. So I just went onto eBay and just, you know, put a couple orders in. Whether it's a retro game store or whether it's a seller on eBay, again, it's always nice to support independent like sellers or, you know, just small businesses in general. Just, it kind of ties back into the first point though. Just make sure you're not getting scammed and don't pay for anything unreasonable. Like don't give in to the scammers and the, you know, scummy people on those sites. My next tip, in the very beginning, I would always recommend buying lots. So like if you have a couple of games that you're looking for, say, I'll just throw out some random games, for example, Borderlands, Brink, Call of Duty World of War, and like Forza or something like that. And then, you know, you like look up a lot on like Mercari or eBay. You're like, I don't know, Call of Duty World of War lot. And then all of a sudden you come across a lot that has like World of War, Borderlands, Forza, and what was the other one that I can't even remember. I literally just said it, I forget. Obviously, as you collect more and more, that strategy won't work as much just because, like, obviously then you're going to be running into a lot of duplicates. Like me nowadays, I can't buy lots because, like, every time that I find a lot, there's always at least one, if not like 5 duplicates in those lots, you know. The lots, they go for anywhere between, and when I say lot, lots are also just like another term for bundles. So you'll find a lot of these, and a lot of these, no pun intended. So literally just go into eBay or Mercari and just search up like Xbox 360 game lot, and you'll see it. They go for anywhere from like $10, where it's only like 2 or 3 games, all the way up to like 100, where you're getting like 20 plus games in one lot. And again, in the beginning, it is a really great way to just collect a lot of games. Like if you're, I'm not necessarily saying that you should focus on quantity over quality, because obviously, which that's another thing we'll be talking about later, like you always want to focus on like games that you actually want to play. Like, I mean, for some people, like if you're going for a complete set, that's a different situation. Like if you're going for a complete Wii U set, then yeah, sure, just go for whatever, get as many lots as possible in the beginning. But, you know, also make sure that there are games that, you know, you'd actually be interested in, because at the end of the day, anybody can, you know, fill up bookshelves of games and get like hundreds of games if they're just buying copies of NHL and NBA, since those games, after the year that they're relevant in, they only go for like $2. So yeah, you could totally do it that way. But if you find a lot that's like a good deal, I would usually say a good deal is anywhere between, you know, find it where like every game in the lot averages out to like $5 or less. Usually the only time that I really jump on lots nowadays is when it's like $2, $3 per game, maybe $4 per game if it's like a lot of really quality stuff in there and it's like bang for buck, I really got to get that. And even then, you know, it's usually a good idea to add up the values otherwise. But if the games inside the lot interest you, that's a great way to get started. The next tip is to buy whatever you want, but also go outside of your comfort zone. So for example, say you're working on your PS4 collection, and normally you only buy NBA, NHL, Madden, or some other safe games like that, and you're like, hey, you know, I want to collect every NBA game on PS4. And there's nothing wrong with that. But then say maybe your tastes expand, you're like, hey, I want to try some other games. At that point, go crazy. Like, go outside of your comfort zone. And even if you don't get to that point, even if you know you do have one thing in mind, like, okay, I'm just gonna collect like every Call of Duty on this system, switch it up a little bit. Just go outside your comfort zone. Like, if you have that one time where it's like, hey, I got an extra like $5-10 to spare, let's set that aside so I can save up for another game. Or even if you find another game for, you know, like that cheap, then just like, hey, you know, let me throw my money at that. Let me give it a shot. Like, you know, throw your money at a Persona game, throw your money at a Souls game, throw it at a Fallout game. I can't tell you how many times over the course of the last 2 decades that I've done that with games, and I've, you know, just ended up finding like one of my new favorite games, or it's just like, hey, I'm gonna buy this game, I'm gonna try it out, and then I end up absolutely falling in love with it. The way I see it, think about video games the same way that you would with food. It's one of those things where you should always keep an open mind, because it's like, hey, sure, I may not have a lot of experience with a food like this, or a food that uses this kind of seasoning, or hey, that's cooked in this certain way, but who knows, it might be my new favorite thing. You should always treat video games, or really any entertainment like that, movies, music, video games, you should treat every form of entertainment and art like that, because at the end of the day, video games are art, and all forms of art deserve to be appreciated and enjoyed and experienced by as many people as possible. My next tip would to always be buy new systems. Now, obviously, I know systems can be a bit more expensive, but if you're able to find some good deals, or if you're really trying to get serious about stuff, I'm telling you, buy some new systems, explore that system's exclusives, and furthermore, to get really interesting with it, if you go back to like the 16-bit era, or even not even the 16-bit era, like the early 2000s, for example, where you got like games with the same name coming out on different platforms. So I think, for example, like Captain America Super Soldier, you had one version exclusive to the DS, and then you had one that came out for the 3DS and the Wii, and then there was one for the PS3, Xbox 360, and PC, and all three of those were 3 completely different versions. And then when you go back to like the 16-bit era with the Sega Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo, for example, you had games like Aladdin where they're very similar in both platforms, but they're different at the same time. There was a lot of games like that, so always explore not only other systems, but again, their libraries and their exclusives, whether it's something, like, modern consoles like Xbox and PlayStation, and, going to Xbox and picking up all the Halo games, you're going to PlayStation and picking up all the exclusives over there, or, Nintendo, all the consoles that they've had, all the exclusives that they have. It is a little bit more expensive to collect for Nintendo stuff, but it's always worth it because Nintendo is just, it's Nintendo. It's just absolutely legendary games on those platforms. But if you only have like an Xbox One or an Xbox Series X or a PS5 in your collection, go a little crazy with it. Go out and pick up a PS2. Go pick up a PS3. Go pick up a SNES. Go pick up an NES. I can tell you firsthand, I literally collect for like every console. Like, when I'm looking at my shelf and in my drawers and like all the other games that I have, like, there's literally not a single console that I can think of that I don't actively collect for. Like, I'm literally looking at my shelf, and on the one shelf there's literally a mismatch of like some Atari stuff, some PS1 stuff, some DS stuff, some 3DS stuff, there's 360 stuff, a big box PC game, Nintendo Switch, and then I've also got stuff for like Super Nintendo, original Nintendo, Turbo Graphics. Like, there's literally not a single console that I don't own at least one game for. Like, I did that intentionally. I literally made an active effort a couple years ago to make sure that I had at least one game for like every platform that like ever. The only exceptions to that would be like really obscure consoles that weren't released in America, even like the 64DD, for example. That's one of those things where it's like, yeah, the 64DD, that's like one of the last ones I gotta pick something up for, but we'll get there when we get there. Another thing worth highlighting is that some games cost more on different platforms. So once again, I only have a couple games next to me, so we'll just gotta grab Dark Souls 2 again. It doesn't apply to this game, but for sometimes, Dark Souls 2 could go for $12 on PS3 on average, but then it could also go for $20 on average on 360, or vice versa. So again, if you have both platforms, or if you're you're looking to collect for multiple platforms from like the same generation, always look and see what the prices are on different platforms, because that even that in itself could end up saving you a lot of money. Because again, it's one of those things where like, hey, even if in some cases a game is only like a $1 difference on average on certain consoles, like that $1 adds up over time. Say by the time you buy 100 games, well, that's $100 that you saved, even if you're only saving like $1 per game. And it's not even going to be one of those things where it's like, hey, every game is more expensive on PS3, so now you got to go to the 360 because all the games are cheaper there. I can tell you firsthand, like, that is not the case. Sometimes some games are just more expensive on 360, whereas on the other hand, some games are just more expensive on PS3. It really just depends on the game. And vice versa, if you collect for the Wii and you go for those games from like the early, because there was that point, right, where like the halfway point of the 7th generation, I want to say, is when that cutoff happened. If you're collecting for the Wii alongside like the PS3 and 360, for example, it's 9 times out of 10 the game is also going to be the cheapest on the Wii. Sure, it won't be like an HD version of it, but if you're trying to save as much money as possible, then hey, there's a route right there for you. Now, the next 2 tips could technically be tied into one, but they're kind of different, so I'm going to keep them separately just to put emphasis on each one. The first tip being, avoid GameStop cases. Do you see this disgrace? This is my copy of Star Wars Bounty Hunter. I was talking about it in the last video that I made about video game collecting, called Things I Hate About Video Game Collecting. And this happens to be just probably one of, if not the thing that I hate most about video game collecting, is these GameStop cases. Again, the game is inside. I've had it for, I got this game at some point in the 2000s, and it's a great game, but the case, not so great. I don't care what kind of collector you are, even if you only care about having the game, no, one day you will regret having this ugly thing on your shelf. Just save yourself the pain and the trauma later, and just don't buy these. Just go get a game. If you do have to buy these for some reason, if this is the only copy left on Earth of like whatever game you're looking for, at least print out the cover art. Anything is better than this garbage. And then the next one, for me personally, I usually try to avoid these, but for some people they may actually be nice for one reason or another, which we'll get to, and that will be wary of greatest hits cases. Now, for me personally, I don't really like having greatest hits cases all that much. I was talking about that again in that video where it's like, hey, I prefer to just kind of have the black label, but at the same time, for some consoles, they're not as bad. Now, if we go back to like the early days of the 360 with the platinum hits, where it's like that giant platinum square and only a tiny section for the cover art, yeah, absolutely despise those. Those things are hideous. But for something like the PS3, as much as I would prefer a black label, I can live with this. It still looks decent enough, and, it does kind of have, like, that, bloody maroon red that I was talking about, where it's like, yeah, like, compare it, when it's lined up on the shelf, it looks, I don't know, just kind of, like, throws off the neat symmetry of all the PS3 cases. But then again, in itself, there's already 2 different types of PS3 cases. You got the ones from the early part of the generation with the Spider-Man font on the side and the little red header, and then they switched it up later to where, the PS3 thing is on top, kind of like how it is here, with just, the PS3 thing on the side, except it's black. time. So there's already a bit of inconsistency there, but then when you toss in the greatest hits cases and these things, it's just like, you know what, again, on their own, they look alright, but I don't know. It's one of those things where it's just like, I'd rather just have like all the black labels there, just because that's how I am as a collector. I like having that first print run edition of the game, but on the other hand, it is kind of cool, because when you have a greatest hits case, it's like, hey, this game earned its spot in the greatest hits. It sold enough copies to get here, you know, it was acclaimed for one reason or another, like, you know, it earned this case. And furthermore, not all collectors are like me, you know, some people actually actively collect all greatest hits, you know, and that's great for them. And furthermore, like I was saying before, I'm the type of guy, I like to just get like the first print run original copy of the game. Like the game that released on day one, that's the copy that I want, with the black label, with whatever the cover art was, none of the splashy text, none of the other stuff like there is here, just like this. However, for some people, for the greatest hits versions, sometimes, and this is another thing that's kind of like depends on the game, sometimes the greatest hits versions are the only ones that include the DLC on disc, which from a preservation perspective is pretty cool. However, I must put an asterisk besides that, because that was more of a thing during the PS2 generation, where in some cases, like Devil May Cry 3, for example, the greatest hits version was more or less like, obviously DLC wasn't really a thing at that time, but it was more of like a special edition of the game, whereas, you know, like the normal black label didn't have some of the features, like, you know, the first print run black label didn't have some of the features that were there on that greatest hits version. But once we got to the PS3 generation, we did see a lot of times where we would see both a black label version of like the cool Game of the Year editions as well as the greatest hits version. So it really just depends, you know, it's one of those things where you gotta do your research on the game. Like, hey, in some cases, even for this like Game of the Year edition, there is a black label of this very Dead Island version. So, you know, I could always replace this down the line and get that instead, but it's one of those things where it's like, hey, you know, I already have the greatest hits version. It is what it is. I'm cool with it in my collection. Like I said, some people actively collect these. But again, it's just one of those things where I like bringing it to people's attention before they get into collecting, you know, just so they don't have those moments down the line where they're looking back and like, oh man, I shouldn't have done that. Or, you know, in some of the cases where it's like, oh man, I wish I would have went for that. So, you know, again, depends on the person. My next tip, don't buy digital. Now, I've heard some funny people over the years. They're like, I'm a digital collector. What are you collecting? Licenses to have access to games for a temporary amount of time? Now, I won't lie. I have bought digital games before. I still buy digital games sometimes. Like, for example, I was talking about this again in the last video, where sometimes there's games that go for like $30+ for the Xbox 360, but they always go on sale for like $5 or less on, you know, Xbox Series and all that. So it's like, hey, it's backwards compatible. It's literally $5, whereas a physical copy would cost $30. It's cool, I'll just buy this one time. And then down the line, if I'm like, oh, I absolutely need that game in my collection, then I could go out and buy it. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's such a niche situation, and it's such a niche case where, unless it's a situation where, you know, the physical version is so expensive that you would be better off buying it digitally, I would always 100% of the time say go buy physical. Because, like, you know, some people are like, what's the convenience factor? You know, what? The convenience factor of not having to get up off your butt and change the disc? It takes like 5 seconds. And the only reason I say this is because, just think, what happens if your account gets shut down, when they shut the store down inevitably, and like, oh, just think about the Wii U, right? That console is literally only 12 years old, and yet they shut down the eShop last year. That means that eShop only lasted for 11 years, so those digital games are only available for that amount of time, and granted, you can still re-download the games that you purchased, but they even already confirmed that that's not going to be a feature like long term. So like, and again, it's one of those things we were talking about earlier where Nintendo games tend to be more expensive, so your whole like Wii U library is just going to go bye-bye. Same thing with 3DS, gonna go bye-bye. Granted, there is other means of acquiring digital media that we're not going to talk about in this video, because I'm not going to advocate for one thing or another. That's, you know, completely up to each individual person as to how they acquire their games. But when we're just talking from an official means, yeah, you're buying a license to a game. We've already seen this with Ubisoft, where they've been like delisting like DLC for like certain Assassin's Creed games and stuff like that, and they were even trying to get to the point of where like even if you purchased it, you couldn't have access to it, because again, when you read like the EULAs and the terms and conditions and all that, like it literally says in there, hey, we can take this away from you at any time. You're just buying a license to it. And if you don't believe me, go and read that stuff. Read the end user license agreements. Go read the terms and conditions. They literally say in there, hey, yeah, this isn't a permanent service, and if we want to take this from you, we can. And again, if you lose access to your account, well, that's it. Whereas with all the games that I have on my shelf, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if I lose access to my account, if I buy a different system. Like, it literally doesn't matter. Well, I know in the case of digital, I mean, you can take it to other systems, but you know what I mean. Like, it doesn't matter if it's on the same account, if I set the settings, whatever. It's put in the disc and play. Simple as that. And furthermore, even after games get delisted off the digital storefronts, which happens like all the time nowadays, that data is still on the disc. So while sure, during the new generation, there's a lot of times where like, hey, even when you put a disc into your console, you have to go through the whole download and installation process. But that's not the point that matters. The point that matters is, again, once the games get delisted off a digital storefront, that's it. You can't ever play it again. Whereas when you have the disc, even if it's a situation like Cyberpunk 1.0, where if you're not able to update the game, it is a little broken on that original Xbox One and PS4 disc, at least you have the data there, and in 99.9% of cases, that isn't actually like how broken most games are on the disc. Sure, some games are incomplete on the disc, or like, you know, aren't as polished, I should say, but at the very least, at least the data is there, and at least you can play something. At least there's something tangible there to experience the game, and for the most part, most games that are released on disc are actually complete, and that Cyberpunk 1.0 example is a very niche or rare example. And my final tip of the day, it's pretty simple. Just start. There's no rules. Nobody's telling you what console to buy for, what consoles to buy, what games to buy, what games not to buy, where to buy them, where not to buy them. Just start, you know? If you're at Walmart and you see, hey, a new Pokemon game looks fun, just grab it. Grab both of them if you want them. Oh, you see an old Pokemon game you want? Go ahead and pick it up. Even if it's a couple $100. Who cares? Just go for it. If you're at a retro game store and you see an Assassin's Creed for $3, get it. If you see a copy of Super Mario All-Stars for $30, get it. Who cares? If there's something nostalgic you want to pick up from your childhood, go get it. If there's something that, you know, you were too young to experience, like say you grew up after the age of like the PS2, for which, let me just say my heart goes out to you. Personally, I grew up during the entire PS2 generation, and I just couldn't feel more blessed. But if you missed that absolutely wonderful console, then you could always go back, buy a PS2, buy some games for it. It doesn't matter what it is, what you want to go for. If it's a video game that exists, just give it a shot. Go for it. Have fun. Always keep your eyes peeled. Always be collecting. And just, you know, again, whether you buy something that you're familiar with, something you've been wanting, or going outside of your comfort zone, it doesn't matter. Just buy games. Have fun. Make sure you're not going too crazy with your money. Obviously, make sure that, you know, you save enough for like groceries and bills and stuff like that. But as long as you set enough aside for necessities, then go crazy. But anyways, those are just some of the tips that kind of came to mind when I was going to make this video. Now I'd love to hear from you guys. Did you guys learn anything from this video? Or are you trying to get into game collecting? Have you been into game collecting for a while, but we're kind of looking for some other advice? Did anything in this video help you? Is there maybe something else that I should have mentioned in this video? Just whatever it is, whatever thinking, I would definitely love to hear from you guys. So this is something that I've been contemplating doing for a while now, and I would like to make more videos like this if there would be interest in videos like this, and that is recent video game pickups type videos. Now, I've been going out a lot lately in video game hunting with my mother. See, in the past, you know, I always just kind of ordered off of eBay or Mercari, and some of these games here are from eBay and Mercari still, just because sometimes, hey, you know, when you go out to a retro game shop, sometimes they don't got games that you're looking for. And it's honestly been such a fun and wholesome and just like, I don't know, just like a fun learning experience going out and like retro game hunting with my mom and visiting some of these like retro game stores near me, because not only is it fun and just, you know, it's just so fulfilling getting to support these small businesses around me, but it's also really cool getting to go out and see like what interests my mom. Because as we've been going out, like one of the places that we go to, it's not only video games, right? Like there's also like figures and like old action figures and posters and movies and just tons of memorabilia, but it also just happens to have a bunch of video games there as well. Then the other store that we go to is basically just like entirely video game themed. Like it's mostly retro video games, new video games, like it's just like it goes all the way back to the Atari, all the way up to stuff like the Xbox Series X and PS5. And of course, each of these places also have Pokemon cards, so I'm not going to include those in this video, but if you guys want to see like my most recent Pokemon card pickups, well, then I'd be more than happy to start making videos on those, because I'm always picking up trading cards for it, whether it be Pokemon cards, Yu-Gi-Oh, Dragon Ball. Now, before we get into all the pickups, I want to switch it up. Usually I do the Patreon and membership shoutouts right at the end of the video, but instead I wanted to do it towards the beginning, just to really shine a light on these people. So a massive shout out to all of you in the low baller tier, and an even bigger shout out and thank you to all of you in the big baller tier, my King and Big Daddy Man, and the biggest shout out thanks to all of you in the G tier, Ride Avengers, and the Cheese Girl. Thank you guys so much. You guys are literal legends. I love you. But now let's look at some video games. So this is going from the end of January up until now. Since I've never done one of these videos before, I just say like, you know, we go over the last course of like the last month and a half or so. So the first pickup that I made, now we're not going in order of when I pick these games up. This is just kind of be like a random order, because it's kind of hard to keep track of exactly when I purchase these games. Like I can only kind of think of like a relative time frame. But in terms of January pickups, I found this lot on eBay that included 3 Assassin's Creed games on PS3, and I was looking up and down in my collection. I was like, hey, I don't got these on PS3 yet, and I love Assassin's Creed, so why not? We got Assassin's Creed 2, Brotherhood, as well as Assassin's Creed 3. But with that, I realized, hey, you know, it's cool that I got these, but there's a certain game missing from this set of 2 right here. And if you know anything about Assassin's Creed, you know what that is, but that'll be coming up a little bit later. Next up, then, I also went ahead and picked up the Arkham Trilogy on PS3. Now, you guys know me, every time that I'm buying a game, I only ever buy, like, the vanilla copy, and I actually, well, give me one second. I do indeed have a vanilla copy of Arkham City right here. It's just that, you know, I wanted the copy that had all the DLC on this, because normally I don't care too much about DLC, but the DLC in Arkham City is really substantial, and the fact that it's not on the disc on Arkham City is kind of a hindrance, because the only way to get like the Catwoman DLC, which is like a huge part of the story, and it's very canon. The only way to get it is with a code, but guess what? The code that I have, yeah, it expired back in, oh, when is that? 2021, which was 3 years ago. And yes, I've tried redeeming it, and for a while, Sony was still accepting, like, expired vouchers. Like, I remember when I bought the God of War collection on PS3, I was able to redeem the PSP games, even though they were, like, however many years out of date, and they still took it, but for some reason, this did not work, so, yeah. Which is pretty sad, because when I bought the Game of the Year edition, this one also came with a code for the Batman Year 1 animated movie. However, that one was expired by, like, I don't know, like, almost 7 years, I think. Oh no, I'm sorry, 11 years, in 2013. So with the vanilla version, you can literally only play through the Batman part, and, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, it's still a complete game on its own, but, you know, when, like, the Catwoman stuff, again, it's like, it's part of the full experience. It's very canon. There's a reason that it was included in the launch thing of the game. It's intended to be there, but for some reason, I guess maybe there was, like, time constraints or something behind the scenes. They weren't able to get it on the disc in time, but with the Game of the Year edition, not only do you get that very canon, you know, Catwoman content that, you know, is a part of the main story, but then you also get all the other stuff, like the Harley Quinn's Revenge DLC, and you're able to play as, like, Nightwing and Robin in the challenge modes, and then you get just all the other stuff. It's, like, the complete definitive version of the game, and it's all on disc, aside from the Year 1 animated movie, which still hurts my heart. Then we got Arkham Asylum and Arkham Origins of which being a super, just, like, I don't even know what I want to call this game. Underappreciated, underrated, like, it's hard to call it underrated, because it's one of those things where, like, for the people that have played it and know how good it is, they know how good it is, and they don't underrate it, because they know it's actually, like, a genuine masterpiece, but it's just, I feel like compared to the other Arkham games, it's overlooked. And the thing is, right, like, I can't even necessarily blame the fans or anything like that, because every time that WB re-releases these games, they only re-release Asylum City and Night. And to a certain extent, I understand it, right, because that's, like, Rocksteady's definitive canon trilogy, but at the same time, it's like, come on, man, like, it's alright, like, just at least give some love to, like, I'm not asking for a remake or a remaster. I'm of the belief that games never truly actually need remasters or remakes. I think that whole conversation is stupid. There is no such thing as a game needing a remake. A game is simply a product of its time, and whether you like it or not, or think it's perfect or not as it is completely subjective. But that being said, it would be cool if this game could at least get re-released or ported to the new platforms, just so more people can actually experience it. Like, I'm all for that. But as it stands, this is my Arkham collection on PS3. You know, it would have been nice to just kind of have like a nice clean collection, just a nice clean trilogy like that, but unfortunately, again, none of the DLC, like not even the Catwoman stuff, was on the vanilla disc, so, you know, we kind of got two things for Arkham City here, but that's cool with me, because they do got two completely different covers. I prefer the vanilla cover, but obviously, if I'm going to play the game, I'm playing this version. And just in case anybody's wondering, no, don't worry, it didn't take me until 2024 to play these games. I played these games years ago on the Xbox 360. It was just one of those things where it's like, hey, I love these games, gonna pick them up on the PS3. But with that concludes the January section of this. Now we're getting into the February/March stuff, and yeah, I can't really organize this in the order that I bought everything in, so we're just kind of gonna be going for it. One thing worth noting is that you're gonna see some sticker residue on here, and that doesn't bother me for the simple fact that I just ordered some Goo Gone on Amazon, so once that arrives, I'm going to be Goo Goning all of the games that have stickers on it in my entire collection, and it'll all just be clean and nice. But first things first, going back to the whole Assassin's Creed thing, yes, I picked up Assassin's Creed Revelations. Now you may be looking at the cover art, and, you know, for the super keen collectors out there, you're like, wait, you didn't get the version that comes with Assassin's Creed 1 on the disc. Why didn't you? And that's because when it comes to collecting, I'm the type of guy where I want, like, the first print run or the most just, like, clean copy imaginable. I want there to be minimal text, minimal anything else, even if it comes at the cost of some content. I don't want anything saying limited edition. I just want the default, most vanilla cases possible, and this is the most vanilla version of Assassin's Creed Revelations that you can get. If you get the other version, there's like a little thing right here that says Assassin's Creed 1 included on the Blu-ray, but if I'm gonna get Assassin's Creed 1, I want to get a copy of Assassin's Creed 1, which I already do have it on the Xbox 360, but, you know, I wouldn't mind double dipping and getting it on the PS3, just because that's how I am sometimes. You know, when I want to replay a game, you know, I want to go back and earn the trophies again, or just simply experience it on a platform I haven't played it on yet, or just, you know, have it on multiple platforms. Why not? But yeah, the Ezio trilogy, just, man, when it comes to Assassin's Creed, that Ezio trilogy, don't get me wrong, I still love the new games. Like, I genuinely enjoy, like, Odyssey, Origins, Valhalla, and all that, and, oh, I mean, Mirage, you know, that was an awesome throwback to the old days of Assassin's Creed, but man, when it comes to, like, that Ezio trilogy, and, you know, even throwing, like, Assassin's Creed 1 in there, it's just, like, Assassin's Creed had just such a different vibe, man. Again, I'm not dissing the new games by any means, because I absolutely love the new games as well. It's just, man, there was just a certain vibe to it, you know what I mean? Next up, we got Thor: God of Thunder, and this came out in the era when, you know, licensed games were still being made. We saw a bunch of Marvel games at the time. We got Thor, Captain America Super Soldier, Iron Man 1 and 2, it says X-Men Origins Wolverine Uncaged Edition, as well as X-Men Origins Wolverine for, like, the PS2 and Wii. They were, like, same title, but they were a different game, and the Young Cage edition was the one that, like, you know, is super collectible or whatever, and goes for a decent bit of money. Essentially, this is like God of War, except you play as Thor. Like, this game is actually awesome. I now officially own every single version of this game. I own it on the Xbox 360, as well as the Wii/3DS, as well as on my iPad and my Nintendo DS. Not like, you know, like the 3DS version. Like, no, there's like two different things there. The DS one is like more of like a 2D cartoonish art style, like, I don't know, like, I guess like beat 'em up you could call it. That game is actually awesome. Then the 3DS and the Wii version are the exact, or the 3DS, Wii, and mobile versions are all the exact same. Then you have the Xbox 360 and PS3 versions, which those two are the exact same. I know it's like, it was that era where it's like, you can have the game with the same name, but it'll be like different depending on the platform. But I officially own every single version of this game, and man, I love all of them. I wish we could get Marvel games like this again, but no, instead we got Avengers, which isn't even available anymore. It's delisted, which I do have that game physically on PS4, which is cool, so I can still play that until the servers go offline one day, and otherwise, as far as Marvel games go, I mean, sure, we got Spider-Man still, Wolverine up the line, but it's like, man, I want more games based on like the Avengers too, like the wider MCU. I love my superheroes. I want more amazing games based on superheroes. Next up, we got Doom 3. Now, unfortunately, this didn't happen before I bought it. This happened after I bought it, and it's really bugging me, so I think I'm gonna either swap out the case or just buy a new replacement case entirely. There's like a little nick there in the cover art, and yeah, that was my fault. There was a little piece of tape there on the side, and I was trying to get it off, and my thumbnail accidentally went a little crazy. So it's a little nick in the case. It really makes me mad, but it is what it is. I'm either going to swap out the case for another one, or I'm just going to order a new one outright. But yeah, man, it's Doom 3. Super underrated game. You know, when it comes to Doom, everybody's like, oh, the original Doom games, and Doom 64, and then, you know, Doom and Doom Eternal. But Doom 3, I've always been there, you know, rooting for this game. Like, man, someday this game will get the love it deserves. And, you know, we've started to see that in recent times. You know, we got like the BFG re-release where more people have been able to play for the first time or re-experience it. But man, Doom 3, it was definitely different, but I've always loved this game. It's genuinely amazing. Next up, we got Darksiders 2. And one thing you're going to notice is I picked up a lot of Xbox 360/PS3 games recently, just trying to like flesh out those collections a bit more, because even though looking at my shelf, I do have, I mean, especially when it comes to Xbox 360, I mean, I have a really big collection there, and PS3, like, yeah, that's a really sizable collection too, but it's at that point where it's like, you know, I'm trying to pick up like all the odds and ends, where it's like, hey, if there's a game where it's like, it's not that much money, and it's something that I've always really wanted to get on this system in particular, whether I've played it before or not, I'm gonna get it. And Darksiders is one of those series where it's like, man, all of these games are amazing, and it genuinely makes me want to cry just how overlooked it is. I mean, we got Darksiders, and they try to bring it back with like the War Mastered Edition on the Xbox One and PS4, as well as the definitive edition of this game on those consoles as well. And we got like Darksiders 3 and Darksiders Genesis, which Darksiders Genesis was such a cool spin on the formula, but essentially, if I could describe these games, they're like 3D, semi-open world, action, adventure, slightly hack and slash elements, also sort of like 3D Zelda. In each of the games, you play as one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. In the first one, you play as war, and the second one, you play as death. And yeah, man, this game, I always thought this cover was just so cool. You see Death there riding on his horse with a scythe, and you know, it even says on the back, like, become Death, like, dude, Darksiders is so sick. It's also backwards compatible on Xbox One and Xbox Series X. And the Definitive Edition is also available on PS Plus Extra, so if you have that service, you can get it there, but highly recommend the Darksiders series if you've never played it. Amazing game. Next up, we got Homefront, and this was one of those where it's like, hey man, I want to get in the collection, because as much as people seem to kind of dunk on Homefront Revolution for some reason, I genuinely love that game. I remember picking it up on my PS4 and be like, man, this is like urban Far Cry, and I absolutely loved it. So, you know, it was one of those things where I was like, hey, I gotta pick up the original on PS3, and plus it was only like $4, so I was like, yeah, I definitely gotta get it there. The cover looks pretty cool too. For some reason, you can see the poster in the back. It kind of reminds me of Black Ops Cold War's like cover art for some reason. Yeah, whether you have or haven't played this game or its sequel, I can highly recommend them. They're genuinely a lot of fun, and they like, I don't understand why they got dunked on so, like, specifically the second one. The first one didn't get dunked on as much. It was the second one that did, and I don't understand why. I really enjoyed it. Then again, I'm the same guy. I've said this multiple times before, where there's not a single game that I can think of that I actually genuinely dislike. Like, I have too much respect for video games as a medium and an art form to be critical or to critique them or just be overly negative about games. Like, I genuinely love video games so much. Like, I have so much respect for them to where it's a point of where it's like, when people try to point out, objective flaw. God, that's a whole conversation for another day. I can't stand when there's like these journalists and reviewers and critiquers online like, I'm gonna give some objective criticism. Like, nobody cares about your objective criticism. What some see as an objective flaw, I could see as a subjective positive or subjective charm. Now, granted, there's very few things where I could say, okay, maybe there's some ground here, like Cyberpunk 2077's launch. That's one thing where we can say, okay, objectively speaking, it was a buggy game. But at the same time, when it comes to the game itself, I looked past that, and Cyberpunk 2077, whether we're talking about the launch version or as it is now, is in my top 5 favorite games of all time. So again, I'm the type of guy where I don't look at things as being flaws, I just look at things as being unique to a certain game, or adding to its charm, or just being like a different spin on things that maybe did or didn't come out in the way that the developer anticipated, but regardless, it's a part of the package, and it's a part of what makes the game art in the first place, you know, because part of art is human error, or human mistake, or human just, you know, innovations, whether the innovations came out, again, the way that the developer anticipated or not, it's entirely human, and that's what I love about video games, which is kind of why I'm kind of, you know, dreading the whole AI future and all that. But again, conversation for another day, but I'm just saying, I don't know, that's my perspective. I just have too much love and respect for video games, and it's literally impossible for me to be negative about them unless there's an objective flaw, like, again, a buggy launch or egregious monetization. Next up, keeping with the theme of underrated / overlooked games, which is definitely going to be the theme for a good handful of these yet, we have Rage. Now, this game is available on the PS3 and the Xbox 360. It is also backwards compatible on the Xbox One and Series X, and I also do believe that it is available through Game Pass over on the Xbox. But if you don't want to play this game, you could also play its sequel, which is available through PS Plus Extra, and for a time was available through Game Pass. I do not believe it's on Game Pass anymore, but again, it is available on PS Plus Extra if you have that subscription. I would highly recommend playing both because they're both absolutely amazing games, but if you just want to play something a bit more modern, or if you just want to get a feel for like how things were or how things are now and then go back to this one, you can't go wrong either way. Like, you don't need to follow the story that closely. Like, they explain basically everything you need to know at the beginning of Rage 2. But basically, this is like a first-person shooter, first-person action / like kind of like semi-open world game. As you can see on the cover right there, it says from the creators of Doom and Quake. And right there, I think that says enough. I'm not going to say any more about the game. I'm just going to say that if you do decide to play this game or its sequel, again, you can't go wrong either way. It's, man, it's one heck of a game. Both of them are. Next up, we got Brink. Once again, and believe it or not, this game is actually published by Bethesda, and this is, again, one of those games where it's like, man, I don't understand why this flew below the radar, because I remember playing this back in the day on the Xbox 360 when it first released. I had a lot of fun with it, though I won't lie, I did kind of fall off of it after a bit. It was just one of those things where I was like, hey, I was playing Call of Duty at the time, so if I wanted my FPS fix, that's where I went, and that might be part of why this kind of just, you know, didn't take off in the way that maybe Bethesda was expecting, because this was in the era of like MW2, MW3, Black Ops 1, so, you know, we had all that stuff out at the time. But basically, this is almost like, man, how do I even want to describe this? It's almost like Call of Duty meets Siege. I mean, that's like a really bad way to explain it, because if you've played this game, you know it's not really like that. It's just more or less like the objective aspect of it. Like, you know in Siege how sometimes you gotta like defend or escort a hostage, or you gotta like defend or defuse a bomb, or you gotta like, you know, be the one setting off the bomb. It's sort of like that, and it's also a bit more fast-paced like Call of Duty. Not super fast-paced like some of the new Call of Duties, like the new Modern Warfare 3, for example, where you're like, you know, running and slide canceling and all that, but it's definitely at the same pace as something like Black Ops 1, I'd say, where it's a bit more realistic, it's a bit weightier too. The game also has a super unique art style. I've always loved the art style, like the characters and stuff. It's sort of like an animated style, but also like semi-realistic at the same time. The shooting feels pretty solid. Furthermore, this game is also free to play on Steam, so you don't need to get it on Xbox 360 or PS3 to play it. You can just play it like free to play on Steam, and I don't know how the online servers are doing either on the console side of things or the PC side of things nowadays. For me, when I played it, I literally just got it to play through the campaign again, because this game does have a full single player campaign, which honestly I got a lot of enjoyment out of it. I literally binged it in a single day because it is not that long. There's two sides of it. It's one of those games similar to something like Mortal Kombat versus DC Universe, if you played that before, where it's like you play as one side of the story and then you play as the other one, but there's like unique events depending on like what side you play on, unique cutscenes, unique areas, unique missions, and all that. And yeah, this game overall was a lot of fun. Again, whenever I played it or play it to this day, I'm usually just diving in for the single player, but you know, I'm sure at least on the PC side of things, since it's free to play, there's probably some players over there, but again, at the very least, if you can't find them, there's always a single player to play, and I highly recommend this game. It goes for pretty cheap on any of the consoles, or super literally $0 on PC if you get it there. So yeah, definitely gets a recommendation from me. Next up, we got Borderlands 2 on PS3. I mean, do I need to say anything about this game? It's Borderlands 2. I mean, it's like one of my favorite first-person shooters. I mean, that goes for the entire Borderlands series. Borderlands 1, 2, 3. I mean, Tales from the... Even though those games aren't first-person shooters, like Tales from the Borderlands, New Tales from the Borderlands, I absolutely love this franchise, this world, even the spin-off games and expansions like the Tiny Tina's Assault on Dragon Keep and then Wonderland. I can never get enough of these games, and I'm hoping Borderlands 4 comes soon. Next up, we got XCOM Enemy Unknown. Now, I know a lot of people are more familiar with this game because of XCOM 2, because XCOM 2 was definitely more popular, at least it seemed that way compared to the original. But XCOM Unknown is the first game in the series, and then there was also an expansion called XCOM Enemy Within. If you haven't played these before, I guess I would describe them as being, what, tactical or strategy games? I guess like strategy RPG. Basically, you're gonna be like, I'm trying to think of the best way to explain this. So you're basically like controlling different characters across the battlefield, kind of like trying to get them to certain objectives. Think of it like Mario and Rabbids Kingdom Battle or Sparks of Hope if you played those games on the Nintendo Switch, where you're gonna be like trying to, you tell them to get into cover, and then there's an enemy, and then it'll give you a certain percentage of your chance to hit that enemy. It's like, hey, is it like 50%? Is it 80%? And I've had times where it says like, hey, you have like 90% chance of hitting an enemy, and yet the shot will still miss. Again, it's kind of hard for me to try to explain it, but I mean, yeah, the game is genuinely a lot of fun, and if you're into, again, something like Mario and Rabbids, I would definitely recommend checking this out, or if you enjoyed XCOM 2, you'll definitely enjoy this, or Enemy Within. Tons of fun, goes for pretty cheap, and yeah, definitely an overlooked / underrated gem. And it's published by 2K, before the era where all of their games had monetization that went for about like 4 times the game's value. Speaking of 2K, they're finally bringing back Topspin for the first time since like 2011, and I'm just scared for the monetization in that game. Like, I enjoy a lot of games published by 2K. In fact, the next one we're looking at is also published by 2K, but it's just like, man, why is the monetization so egregious in their games sometimes? Next up, we got a pretty infamous one, Duke Nukem Forever. I never understood why this game got so much hate. This is another one where it's like, man, I really enjoyed it. I mean, sure, after waiting for so long for a Duke Nukem game, I mean, I don't know, but at the same time, I mean, I feel like it's almost like Cyberpunk syndrome, where after waiting for so long and after so much hype has been built up, like, no matter what they release, nothing would have satisfied the fans. But I don't know, I just, like, I've tried reading reviews and watching videos, and I just don't understand their criticism. Again, I never really understand any criticism towards video games, though. Like, every time I'm watching a reviewer or a critiquer or reading something, and they're, like, trying to be critical or point out flaws in a game, I'm just kind of sitting there like, okay, but like, I don't know, it's always so opinionated. But then again, that's just me. I've always just had a lot of love and respect for the medium, so it's hard for me to really be negative about games at all. I just take games at face value for what they are and just fall in love with them and enjoy them and have fun with them for what they are. Yeah, Duke Nukem Forever, man, this game, this is one of those games where it's like, it doesn't matter what's going on in my life, what year it is, just, I can always pop this game in and be like, hey, you can beat this game in however many hours, you can definitely get it done in a day, and it's just like, you just have a fun time. I've always loved games like Duke Nukem and like Serious Sam and stuff, where it's like, it's sort of like those Quake / Doom type games, but the main character is so much like grit and attitude. I love it. Next up, we got Destiny for the PS3. Again, one of those games where, yeah, it's available on PS4 and Xbox One, but at the same time, the online is free on PS3, so if there ever comes a point where it's like, hey, for some reason, like, money's really bad, inflation gets the best of me, I can't afford any of my bills for my online services on my other consoles, well, hey, I got an endlessly replayable game on my PS. I mean, I already have plenty of endlessly replayable games on my PS3, but you know what I mean, like an endlessly replayable online looter shooter. I mean, at the same time, I also have Borderlands 2 for that, but I don't know, I wanted Destiny on my PS3, okay? It was only $4. Next up, we got Gears of War 1, just one of those games where it's like, you gotta have it in your Xbox 360 collection. There's not much that can be said. I've poured hours into this franchise, and, even with, like, the most recent entry, Gears 5, when that first came out, I played that game like crazy. I still dive in from time to time. I love Gears of War. Next up, we got Battlefield Bad Company. Now, the main reason that I picked this up is mainly just because it was delisted, because for a while, I didn't have to worry about owning it because it was available through, like, EA Play on Xbox One, so I was like, okay, I'm good, but then they delisted the game, so I was like, well, shoot, so I went to my local game shop, and it was there for $5, and man, let me just tell you, for between this game and the second game, the campaigns, they feel like Battlefield, but it's just, they're so, I don't even know, because they still have this element of, like, the militaristic realism and all that, but they're also just a bit more lighthearted, a bit more laid back. You get to really, like, fall in love with the goofy characters and stuff like that. If you've never played the Bad Company campaigns, both 1 and 2, I highly recommend both of them. Definitely play them in order. Like, you don't have to, but it'll just, like, help you, I don't know, I guess get even more connected to the characters if you play the first one and then go to the second one. They're not that, that long either. Battlefield, it's sort of similar to like Call of Duty or something like that, where, like, the campaigns aren't too long, but they're a lot of fun the whole way through. But yeah, the Bad Company campaigns, oh man, it's so much fun. It's really a shame that 2042 didn't have a campaign. Again, I've always really enjoyed the Battlefield campaigns. Like, I have a lot of fond memories of Battlefield 3 and 4's campaign, and Battlefield Hardline. For those of you that have played the Hardline campaign, you know how fun that one is. Next up, this is one where it's like, yeah, there's so many ways to play this game nowadays, whether it's through PS Plus Extra, whether it's on the Switch, whether it's through Xbox Game Pass, or just whatever. It was there for $3, and it's like, dude, like Skyrim, okay? It was $3. I was like, dog, I gotta add it to my collection, of course. Like, again, there's so many ways to play this game, but it's like, it's $3. And plus, I'm the type of guy where it's like, hey, if there's a game I love, I want to own it physically, because we've learned so just, you know, very well recently that when it comes to digital ownership, well, you don't own anything. 99.999% of the time when I'm buying games, it is always physically. I can't remember the last time that I bought a digital game. The only games that I buy digitally are the Call of Duty games, simply because the fact that I game share with my stepdad, so, you know, I get them digitally, so then he's able to get them as well. Otherwise, yeah, I'd also buy those physically, just because, you know, I don't like buying things that I don't actually own. And finally, we have yet again an all-time classic, Final Fantasy X. What can I say? It's Final Fantasy X. I still gotta get 10-2 in the collection, but I love Final Fantasy. The entire series. There's not a single game in the series or the spin-offs that I don't like. You know, I know some people, again, try to give flack to Strangers of Paradise. I really enjoy that one. Final Fantasy Type 0, you know, such an underrated spin-off in the series. Love that game. And when it comes to all the mainline ones, even the MMOs, absolutely love all of them. And Final Fantasy X, I mean, such a beautiful, like, look at that cover. I know there's some goo up here. Again, the Goo Gone will take care of that, but man, just looking at this game just brings me so much joy. Almost, it literally makes me want to cry just because of how happy this game makes me anytime that I've played it. So, yeah, looking forward to diving back into this one for sure. But anyway, that is all of the recent game pickups that I picked up since like the end of January / early February up until now. And since I've been going out retro game hunting with my mom a lot lately, I'll try to do these maybe at least once a month if there's interest in this, of course. Now I'd love to hear from you guys. Did you guys see anything here today where it's like, hey, I never heard of that game before? Or maybe there's just some games in here where it's like, hey, I wanted to pick that up a while ago and maybe I reminded you of it. Just whatever it is, whatever thinking, I would definitely love to hear from you guys. I was getting ready to do the Patreon shoutouts because I always do those at the end of the video, but I forgot we did that at the beginning of the video. So we'll just kind of wrap things up here. Thank you guys for watching. Have an amazing day. Stay beautiful. I love you all. Peace.